OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Yes. Very welcome along to Friday's OTB AM. It's Adrian and Eoin with you this morning, right the way through until 10 o'clock. Normally at this point of the show, we say we've a busy show coming up for you today, but hold on to your face masks because it's absolutely jam-packed for the next 2.5 hours. And as you just heard, we are brought to you in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. And if you don't have the OTB Sports app already, by the way, just search OTB Sports in your app store and you can download all of our good stuff there. So what's coming, you ask? Well, John Giles is on the way very shortly. Lots of good stuff. He was in conversation with Nathan last night. That is en route very, very shortly indeed. David Meyler is going to be live on the line just before 8 o'clock this morning, and there is so much to discuss with him, including primarily, I think it's going to be Liverpool-Chelsea, but if you have any questions, do please get them into us for David live on the line this morning, and the impact of Thiago as well on that Liverpool team. Going to run you through the back pages at about 8:15 this morning. Alan Quinlan with an interesting weekend of rugby upcoming, obviously both Leinster and Ulster in Heineken Cup quarter-final action. And can they get it done will be the main question for Quinny this morning at 8:35. Again, get your questions in for him. We've the newest provincial rugby president on the line at about 9 o'clock this morning, and also the first female president ever for Connacht Rugby, Anne Heneghan, joins us to discuss that at 9. At 20 past 9, we're going to look ahead to Germany versus the Republic of Ireland. That game, 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, and Ruth Fahy is going to join us to preview and to, I don't know if we're going to be wondering exactly if Ireland can get it done, because by all accounts, it seems like that is not on the radar against a team of the power of those Germans, but we'll see how that goes. And then Joe Molloy will talk all things US Open at about 20 to 10 this morning, depending on how we're going time-wise. And good start for Rory, and lots of interesting stories developing at Winged Foot. So we'll get to that with Joe at about 20 to 10 this morning. So that's a bit of a flavour of what's coming up. And of course, remember as well, over the weekend, the only place that you can hear live and exclusive commentary from the Premier League and Heineken Cup this weekend will be at the earlier time from 12:30 on Off the Ball, and that will be full commentary of Ulster's Champions Cup clash against Toulouse, commentary from Neil Tracy and Bernard Jackman there, and then at 4:30 Chelsea against Liverpool, that game that we've mentioned, in the company of Nathan Murphy and Kenny Cunningham. So all of that to come. It's 7:32 on this Friday morning. Thrilled that you could join us, and do get your comments into us over the next 2.5 hours thereabouts. But right now, John Giles from Thursday night on Off the Ball. He's talking to Nathan, he's talking to Thiago, to Liverpool, Leeds Premier League return, and Chelsea start. Yeah, well, most teams don't go to Anfield with that plan, if you call it a plan. I think he's like that. I think home or away, he's going to play the same way. And I think if he gets the goals that everybody needs and matches, I know he signed a couple of players, then I think they'll do okay. You'll be looking at mid-table, because they're not going to give up against anybody if they can go to Liverpool and do what they did. I think they took Liverpool by surprise on the day, attacking them. There's very few teams go to attack Liverpool, but they weren't scared of that. And apart from the penalty at the end, it was a forward, wasn't it, Nathan? That gave the penalty away.
It was the
most stupid penalty I've ever seen in my life. To get a draw there, but I think if they can get the goals, like most teams, you obviously have to get goals. I think their attitude was good, their approach was good, and to take on a team like Liverpool took a bit of courage to do so. So I think he's no short of courage, Bielsa, that's for sure.
The questions about Liverpool then, because after the restart, okay, the title was pretty much won, but they were conceding more goals, they were making more mistakes, and that continued into that game on the opening day. Your thoughts on then what teams should do? Because the obvious thought will be, after Leeds go and attack and ask questions, that's what other teams should do. But I guess Leeds, as you say, are set up like that all the time. They're always going to be brave and try and take the game. If a Newcastle or a West Ham, who traditionally would sit back,
yes.
If they try and suddenly go and get at Liverpool, are they on a hiding to nothing?
I think so, because they wouldn't believe in what they were doing if they were attacking, Nathan. You know what I mean? In other words, we're not allowed to attack, and if it's still no score, we're doing well. I think that has been the approach of a lot of teams going to Anfield, whereas Bielsa is a different animal to anybody else, Nathan, in the way he approaches the game. There's nothing surer than that. And I think we saw him last year against Arsenal away in the Cup,
And the first 45 minutes, they played Arsenal off the pitch. They didn't score. They deserved to score, didn't score. I think that's what happened to them a lot last year. And they finished up losing the game. But the first half, they played Arsenal off the pitch. You know?
Yeah.
And
they ran out of steam a bit.
They won't. I don't think they'll sit back with any of the teams. And I think that took Liverpool by surprise. And in Liverpool's case, you know, we've had all this fuss over the lack of football and everything else. But it's a long time since they won it, Nathan. Since Liverpool actually won it. Now, I know they had quite a few matches afterwards, but I go on my experience at Leeds when we won the league in 68-69. We actually went till the second last match of the season before winning it. But when the next season started, and it comes around very quickly, it took us a long time to get the attitude that we had in the last 8 to 10 matches of the season, Nathan. Because when you're going for it, you can't contrive the excitement, what you have to do in that. Because once the season starts again, in my time it was 42 matches, you knew you had a whole season in front of you. So you don't have that energy and that go in you that you did in going into to win the league. So it's no coincidence with Liverpool. Once they won it, even before the lockdown, Nathan, like after that they didn't play well at all. You know, by their standards. Once they won the Premiership, you know, at that time, because you can't contrive. You can't say, well, no, this is the first match of the season or the second match of the season, because you know you've got a lot of matches to go before you can win it. Yeah. Rather than the last 8 to 10 matches where you have to. Well, Liverpool's case, they didn't have to win it, but they had to get those points to finish it off, which they did. But once they finished it off, there was a slump. And I think it's not unusual, Nathan. In my experience with it, I think it took us nearly till Christmas before we really got going in a way that we had been going for the last 8 to 10 matches.
Yeah, it's an interesting point because even, as you say, after they had clinched the title, there was a bit of a slump, particularly at the back. But even the few games after lockdown, as they were waiting to win it, everybody knew they were going to win the title. It was just a matter of when. Yes. So they haven't really had a match with pressure, with a lot riding on it, probably since back in March, since they were knocked out of the Champions League by Atletico Madrid. So for them to get back into that groove and intensity that's needed, is it understandable that it might take a few matches?
Well, I can only give you my experience on it, and obviously it was a different time, Nathan, but we had to go at Leeds in 96-69 when we won it. We had to go until the second last match of the season because Liverpool were chasing us, and we had Liverpool at Anfield. And if Liverpool beat us at Anfield, it would have gone to the last match of the season, where we would have had to win it. We were a home match against Notts Forest. We got a point at Liverpool to win it. But up to that, we had to go in every match we played. You know, it became a little bit of a joke with Don and the lads. You say, if we get anything today, I think we'll win it. So when we got to Liverpool, it was true. We needed a draw at Liverpool to win it. So it did. His G'ing up had to come through at Liverpool. In other words, if we got something at Liverpool, I think we'll win it.
You did win it.
But the start of the next season, Nathan, comes around very quickly. It took us ages to get going again with that intensity that you need, that's there when you're going for the league, or the league in our day, now in the Premiership. So it might take Liverpool a couple of games, just a couple of, kick up the backsides to really get going again. Because I think Leeds, to be fair to Leeds and Liverpool, I think Leeds took Liverpool and a lot of people totally by surprise with their approach. Nathan.
What about Virgil van Dijk then and the mistake he made? Because there were mistakes again towards the end of the season, and here you've spoken enough about him over the last couple of years for people to know how highly you rate him. Would you have any concerns about those type of mistakes and the casualness that's appeared in his game?
Well, he plays in that manner, I think he's a very, very confident lad, Nathan, and I think sometimes a little bit overconfident. I mean, obviously the other day he should have got the ball away. But I think when you're used to playing it out from the back and playing it in the way that he does, it's sometimes very difficult to pick the exact time to get it up into the stand. And it could well be with him, the bit of complacency that, well, here we go again. It's like this time last year they played Norwich, who had just been promoted and hammered them, I think it was 4-1 at that time. And I think Leeds did take them by surprise.
Yeah.
took me by surprise, actually, Nathan, in the way that they had to go at Liverpool.
Looking at some of the other results of the weekend, then our commentary game was Everton's win against Tottenham, and it's hard to think of too many more impressive Everton performances in recent times. The signings that Carlo Ancelotti has made, James Rodriguez, one of the more exciting of pre-season. Alan came in the middle of midfield. Decore, they look a transformed team. Would you look at that Everton side and think maybe they could put a bit of pressure on for a top six?
Well, I definitely, Nathan. They got players in now, and I think the big thing with Everton over the years, they've had the director of football. I think the owner thought, well, we'd get the manager in and it'll be the coach. I don't think the managers up to Ancelotti in recent times have been picking the players, Nathan, in the transfer market, actually picking them in. So I think the owner must have thought, well, we've tried all that. Let's see what the manager... And I think Ancelotti would have gone to him as a very experienced manager and insisted, or give me a chance to bring my players in. Who would know the players better than him, Nathan? And he brought those 3 or 4 players in there that you mentioned. Really, really top-class players. Now, if you had a director of football, he mightn't look at them. In other words, I know I keep going on about it, but 90% of management of a team is getting rid of the players you don't want and getting the players in that you do want. Now, if you have a director of football and he's bringing in the players that he wants, it's not the same for the manager. All managers have a thing in their head, Nathan, of what they want and what they need and who they want, right?
Yeah.
And it's like fulfilling your dreams. This is what I need. This is what I want, and it's 90% of the job. Actually, in my opinion, it's 90% of the job, getting rid of the players you don't want and getting in the players you do. And I think the owner of Everton now has got fed up with the directors of football because the transfer system hasn't worked.
Yeah.
And I think Ancelotti said to him, right, now what we'll do is give me a chance to bring my players in. I mean, who knows the players better than this guy? Well, he's already managed some of these guys that he's brought in, Nathan.
Yeah, he had James Rodriguez at Real Madrid and got the best out of him, it seems, at Real Madrid, and also knows Alan from his days at Napoli. It does seem as though they have had a change in attitude as to that director of football role, because I know Marcel Brands is still there and that's his title, but when you compare to when Steve Walsh, who'd come from Leicester and was so highly rated after signing Riyad Mahrez and N'Golo Kante, it did seem as though he had all the power and he landed the likes of... whether it was, when they brought Rooney and Klaassen and players like that in. But Marcel Brands seems to maybe talk to the manager a bit more and give him that bit of influence. Oh,
I think there's no doubt about that, Nathan. I think it might have been one of the things that he insisted on when he was going in. I mean, he's a very experienced manager and he knows exactly what the game is all about. You have to get in the players you want. You have to get rid of the players you don't want. I know I keep going on about it, but it's so important. Because everybody has a vision. All managers have a vision of what they want in their team. And the way to fulfill that vision, if that's the right word, is to get the players in you want. You have to say, well, I need him for that, him for that, him for that. And if somebody else is doing it, then, it just doesn't work. In my opinion, it doesn't work.
They've had all sorts of issues in midfield over the last 3 or 4 years. And listen, they're a club that have massively underachieved for the amount of money that have been spent, but it's been a bit of a graveyard for 30, 40 million pound midfielders. Alan has come in, and again, he probably doesn't fit into the model. He's 29. There's no real sell-on value in the next 3 or 4 years, but, geez, he ran the show.
You're talking about Alan?
Alan in midfield, yeah.
Yeah, and Rodriguez beside him. All of them, they were really, really good. He would know what these guys can do. And I think what's happened over the years, that, a lot of teams, which sounds great, will start getting the young fellas in, and like if you find in football, the future is today. You have to do it now, Nathan, with an eye to the future. Do you know what I mean? You can't say, well, in 5 years' time, this team will be doing this, that. I've never seen it work that way. I mean, Manchester United are doing it now, but they've got some experienced players as well, and they are getting outstanding players, but they still have to do it. Whereas there's nothing better than experienced players to bring some of these young players along, bring them along. And what you find with players, in my opinion, I think players are at the peak of their careers, Nathan, when they're 28, 29, 30, 31. And it depends then how long they can keep their fitness. And the top players get better and better every year, as long as the physical aspects are good. So signing a player for 27, that's great. He's at the peak of his career. And now they can actually do things straight away, not worrying about in 4 years' time or 5 years' time. It doesn't always work that way. And I think Ancelotti, again, is a really, really experienced manager. He's been around a long time. He knows exactly what the game is about and the players to get in.
We spoke last week about Seamus Coleman and how you felt he should have been in that Ireland team ahead of Matt Doherty. The two of them go head-to-head then on Sunday, and Coleman has one of his best performances for probably a couple of years. Is that reflective of the difference in quality that he's playing alongside? Because people have written Seamus Coleman off. You know, he's lost a yard of pace, he's been caught out of position. Was Everton's decline in their struggles just a part of that? And actually, now that he has quality midfielders who, if he plays it into Alan, he knows the ball is going to stay. If he plays it to James Rodriguez, he knows he's not going to lose it and he's going to be out of position. Is his improvement down to Everton's improvement?
Definitely. I mean, you're only as good as the players you have around you, Nathan, you know? And as you say, but first of all, I don't think Coleman was playing as badly as some people said he was. But he certainly wasn't playing as well as he could. But now that he's playing with better players, I mean, he had to mark Son who's one of the few wingers who was really, really good. And not only did that, attacked at the right time. He was excellent. And the whole Everton team were excellent. So obviously, the better the players you play with, it makes it easier for each other. And I think Matt Doherty was on the opposition, who was a very, very good player, and in fact came up on the wrong side of Mourinho. Mourinho's hitting out again. I know we'll come to that in a minute, but I felt sorry for Matt Doherty. I think he said he didn't look fit or something like that, you know. Yeah. And of course he couldn't take the blame himself. But Seamus Coleman's performance was outstanding, really outstanding. As the Everton performance was. I mean, Spurs are supposed to be one of the rated teams, but I thought they totally played them off the pitch.
Yeah, they did. The way you're talking then, when I'm talking about Everton finishing top six, you feel maybe even higher than that they can be aiming for? Well,
I wouldn't. There's a lot of good teams in it, Nathan. You've got Liverpool, Everton, Chelsea, and I know we'll be talking about Chelsea. But I wouldn't put it beyond them at all to finish in the top six. Right. If they do that and do it well, that's a big improvement on what they've been doing for the last few years.
Well, massive, yeah. Last season, 12th place finish, and
and like a lot of money gone out. This looks like a team that can really play. And I think if they finish in the top six, it would be a definite improvement to go on and improve from there. You have to build from somewhere.
Yeah. We do want to talk about Spurs and Jose Mourinho. I need to take a quick break. John, just before the break, I was asking you about the text that came in about the mouthiest players you'd played against, because we're going to be talking to Eoin Wright after 8 o'clock, who was admit himself that he had quite a lot to say to opposition defenders when he was playing. Are there people that stand out that maybe went a little bit too far, had a bit too much to say for themselves?
Well, there was quite a few. The worst moment I came across was a lad called John Gilchrist at Colchester. Colchester we played against Colchester in the Cup. One of the biggest surprises ever in the Cup. They beat us 3-2, Nathan. Right. And I was just hoping in the match that we'd get a draw and bring him back to... He never stopped. And of course, when they won, you have to take it, Nathan. But I never had to go to more mouthy than physical.
Yeah.
I didn't mind that.
And did he unsettle you that he was at you so much?
No, well, it would gee you up a bit, but right. It wouldn't put you off your game.
Right.
No. So I was at it a lot myself. But me and Bremner was a devil for us.
Oh yeah.
Oh, a devil for us. Yeah, he'd get anybody going.
And what did he say?
Against Manchester City, and I got into a clash with Franny Lee, and I know all the players come around, and the first player over straight into my face was Mike Summerby. Right. And my reaction was, "You keep your effing nose out." And Billy says, "Have you seen the size of his nose, wee man?" Oh, there's some terrible stuff. But Bremner was the like if we were on the pitch, say Peter. I remember playing against Peter Storey. Now Peter Storey was a terrific player, hard nut, never said a word. Mad staring eyes he had, but really good at what he did. And playing at Highbury one day, and he says, "What about this madman? He'd be between me and him. You know what I mean? Yeah. Have you seen this madman?" He said, "It was the mad staring eyes, as if he wasn't there. You know what I mean?" He said, "Seen the paper this morning, his missus has left him." And I think it was true. but he'd be in between us. Like we wouldn't be talking to him. You know what I mean?
Right.
Oh, no, Billy was terrible at that.
And if Billy was still with us, God bless him, would he be saying the same about you? Would he be saying you had plenty to say for yourself?
I know he'd want to take the credit for it.
Would he?
Oh, yeah.
He was delighted with himself.
Oh yeah. You couldn't say anything to Billy that upset him.
Right.
And he'd say anything to anybody. You know what I mean? He was a terrific player himself. You see.
Yeah.
You know, because then the players that he was having a go at couldn't say, well, what about you? Well, you can't play, which he would say to some of the other players. You know.
Yeah.
Like he'd say to me, "Hey, wait, man, you've seen him there." He says, "Can't play, can he?" See, of course, I'd say, "No, of course he can't." But you know, whatever it might be. But there was always some going on, and some worse things than that as well. You know, in terms of when it was really, really bad.
Right.
And there was a lot of physical, the verbal stuff. There was a lot of physical stuff in those days as well. You know.
Yeah, there sure was.
But your man John Gilchrist was the worst. He was a Scottish lad, and they were beating us, and they did beat us. So once you're beaten, you can't say anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
he'd be throwing out loads of stick.
This is 1971. Colchester are 4th division side, and Leeds are very much the real deal. Like that. Geez, it
was one of the biggest upsets ever in the cup. And the thing was, it always lived with us, Nathan. That was in 1971, right? And when you see the BBC anything doing the FA Cup or whoever's doing it now, they beat us in 71. We won the cup in 72, and we were beaten in the final by Sunderland in 73.
Yeah.
Right. 72 is never mentioned. Never mentioned that we actually won, and that was when Colchester beat us in 71. The next time we lost in the cup was 2 cup finals later to Sunderland, but they'll always pick them out.
Yeah,
72 is never mentioned. It was the Centenary Cup final that we won, never mentioned.
Yeah, and 70 comes up all the time as well, and the match against Chelsea. So it's it's unfortunate that that's the one they focus in on. Ian Wright said that actually the biggest insult he would give to centre backs is if he didn't say anything to them. If he just kept quiet, it'd be a sense he didn't respect them enough to actually have a go at them.
How does he know? He never did that.
I do want to touch on Spurs before we wrap up because, look, terrible start to the season. Jose Mourinho afterwards, as you say, questioned Matt Doherty's fitness, and in fairness, Doherty may not have been fully fit. He was just back when he was playing with Ireland, but that his side were lazy, which it very much fits in the Mourinho template now from Manchester United of, it's saying about me, this is all on the players.
Yeah, well, it looks that way, Nathan. You know, they're talking about what's his name coming in? Bale coming in. Maybe Dele Alli going out. But I didn't see the documentary. But what you read about the documentary, he wasn't praising the players again, Nathan. I don't know why they did a documentary. It's a terrible situation to have people talking about, and Pochettino's going mad about himself. I don't blame it, because he got blamed for nearly enough blame for doing what he did. So a terrific job with them. But in Mourinho's case, they were poor. He said they were lazy, they were slow, they were lazy. And
is that always on the manager, John? Like, if the team is lazy, is that not down to the manager?
Of course it is. But nothing ever bad is down to Mourinho, Nathan. That's the point that I'm trying to make in a roundabout way here, is that he hits out. You know, Dele Alli, Matt Doherty, they're lazy. Like, well, you know, if they're not fit and they're lazy, he's the manager. He's responsible for it. And he should take... Look, no problem taking responsibility when they were winning, Nathan. You know, and I've never known it to be good for a manager to criticise a team publicly. That's what he did at Manchester United. That's what he hits out. When the team is not doing well, it's never his fault. So now whether Bale can make a difference, look like he's going there, we have to wait and see. But like from what Everton did to them on the weekend, it certainly wasn't good. And it wasn't as if, well, I must take responsibility for that. He doesn't do that. And if it keeps going the way it's going, it'll look like the Manchester United all over again.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Looking for a football show with a bit of a twist? Team 33, the football magazine show for the football purists.
And it's been a complete failure for English teams in the European formats this year, Colin.
I don't know.
Come on, it has! They had one team in the quarter-final.
The very best interviews with the cult heroes of the past and a look at the cultural side of football. Team 33, live at 9 p.m. every Friday on OTB Sports Radio. Live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
As we learn to live with COVID-19, sport and fitness for your family are more important than ever. At the Sport Ireland campus in Blanchardstown, our facilities aren't just for elite athletes, but the community as well. So, for European Week of Sport, we're hosting an open week from September 24th for families to try out a new sport and fitness experience together. So join Dad for gymnastics or Mum for rugby with over 20 different options. Check sportirelandcampus.ie for more.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Yeah, just before 8 o'clock on this Friday morning. A very good morning to you, John Giles, there with Nathan before the break in pretty sensational form, it has to be said, and I hope that's the case as well for Eoin Sheahan. Good morning to you, Eoin.
Good morning, Adrian. How are things?
All sorts of shade been thrown out by John Giles there this morning, and you can check out the full piece up on otbsports.com. Obviously, you were watching the game last night. What do you make of it?
It was disappointing, obviously, from a Shamrock Rovers perspective. The real sense at this point is that there are certain games that just aren't as enjoyable without fans, and last night is certainly one of those that you felt that at least after going 1-0 down, there would have been that surge of energy from the crowd to try and get the team back into the game, and it would have really felt like a special night. There was just the sense of a pre-season friendly written all over this, and unfortunately there is the sense of a pre-season friendly written all over a lot of big games at the moment, but yesterday particularly felt that way. It felt like an exhibition match. You kind of had to remind yourself that this was actually a knockout European tie. But at the same time, there were a couple of interesting tidbits in it, like the fact that you had Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who I guess kind of acted in a little bit of frustration here and there, who couldn't quite get into the game at times in central positions and decided to come out to the wings to pick up the ball. When I say he couldn't really get into the game, I mean that he wasn't touching the ball every second touch, and that's kind of the sort of stamp he wants to put on the game.
Yeah, literally, I'd say about 30 seconds before he rattled the net, I'd sort of been looking at the game and preparing for today, and had written down a note that, looking at Ibrahimovic's heat map of touches within the box, it was pretty cold.
Yeah.
And then 30 seconds later, he rattles it home. But I think from a Rovers point of view, it's it was almost indicative of the game in some ways, because they were in it and they looked really at home, didn't they, for the vast majority of that game, particularly after the restart, like that 10 minutes after the restart, they looked almost a better team at that stage. But you can do that against a team like Milan, and you just come undone after a couple of moments of genius.
Yeah, for sure. It was, Sherry Byrne was saying in commentary as well last night that this really felt like the moment for Shamrock Rovers, that sort of third quarter of the game. And I guess it was weird in a sense that they had put a lot of work into how they were going to behave when they got set pieces, and clearly Stephen Bradley had said, when we get an opportunity, everybody just has to go forward because this is our greatest chance of scoring. And it turned out actually from open play is where Shamrock Rovers probably had their best opportunities, or looked like they would do most damage to AC Milan. And I guess there was always going to be a certain sense of jeopardy when you feel like you're on the break against a team like AC Milan, because then they're counter-pressing and their counter attack is always going to be so impressive and so quick. And I think that was certainly one of the attributes that was noticeable last night, was just the pace of that AC Milan team. Even though they're really in pre-season, they're just so fast in so many important areas.
Yeah, and as Rovers settled into it, even when they were on their own counter-attack or on the break themselves, it felt as if they were almost unsure. Maybe not unsure, but didn't want to necessarily commit themselves as much forward as they might do normally, obviously on the basis that what you had at the other end was pretty full of threat. We must mention on as well that it's been an interesting week. We shouldn't let the week go past that without mentioning it's been a week for doppelgangers in some regard. You've been mentioning this yourself on Twitter. I think we can take a look here at here we go. So I mean, a brother from another mother. It's
a brother from another mother is right. I actually got this like obviously the comment here is the sort of badumch moment of this entire thing. But somebody, I need to dig out the tweet. Somebody did tweet me this comparison earlier in lockdown. Smoke weed every day, 88, by the way, said it looks like the interviewer is interviewing himself after 3 months on a desert island. And I would love to meet Smoke Weed every day, 88, to shake his hand for such a great comment. But somebody did point out the similarity on that specific doppelganger earlier in the lockdown period. And I think they kind of made a comment to me, potentially turning it to him as a result of me going unshaven for a few weeks. So obviously that tweeter probably could have got bigger numbers if I'd seen it or something like that. But no, that's sometimes when a YouTube comment is left, you just have to bow down, accept your fate, and take your beating in those sort of situations. And yesterday was very much that case.
You're in the same boat as myself. I just find that anybody else ginger that pops up, it's just an immediate comparison. And, regardless of any other likeness, it's the colour of the hair. Yeah. Although, to be fair, in that way, Eoin, I will say, in this instance, it's not a million miles off the mark.
I will say, yeah, there is that. It's usually, for me, it's usually Chesney from Coronation Street. That's usually the one that gets me. But, of course, McGill, the guy who lost that absolutely cracking World Snooker Championship semi-final, that's the suggestion that Sheahan tweeted to us yesterday as well. Anthony McGill, isn't it? He's the next one. So basically, do you have facial hair? Are you ginger? Then you automatically look like me, basically, which is gingest at its very worst and most disgusting, I must say.
I'm with you. Right, sit tight on. We've David Meyler on the way very, very shortly. Before that, Ian Wright and Sol Campbell were on our Cadbury FC very special remote roadshow this week. You can check out the full video on youtube.com/offtheball. But in this clip here that we're about to show you, Ian Wright talking about his admiration for Roy Keane and how he had great respect for him as a leader.
Ian, when you were given centre-backs jip, did you ever give Roy Keane some jip when you were players?
Me and Roy Keane always argued when we was on the pitch. We always were spitting at each other in respects of words and saying stuff and things like that. You know what I mean? And the thing is that when you're doing it as well, even at the time, you knew. Because I remember when Roy Keane signed for United from Forest, me and Roy Keane had some run-ins when he was at Forest. But when he signed for United, I remember we played them in South Africa. We played Man United. I think we beat them, scored a couple of penalties. We beat Man United. And I remember in the tunnel, I remember saying, all the best in your United career. I said, yeah, cheers. And we was always like that. But like when we was on the pitch, you know, if I didn't have Tony Adams as a captain and a leader, I'd probably want someone like Roy Keane as a captain and leader, especially now I know him. We talk about football all the time, talk about the days. You know what I mean? He's the kind of character it's about winning, man. It's all winning. And whatever it takes in respect of you as a professional to get yourself in a situation and a position to make sure that you win is the only thing that he's going to accept. He's not going to accept anything less than that. He's my friend. You know what's really good about it is that the way we went at each other then, when you see now, to be able to call him my friend now, you know what I mean? I know, you know what I mean? We talk about all sorts of stuff, you know, now. That makes me feel good. And this is great about the game.
That is Ian Wright and Sol Campbell in conversation with Nathan Murphy. It's the Cadbury FC Roadshow, and the full thing will be coming your way on OTB social channels a little bit later in the day. We do have a packed show for you, by the way, between now and 10 a.m. this morning. David Meyler is on the way very, very shortly. We'll talk to him about Liverpool's great new signing, Thiago, and the impact that he's going to have. Where does he fit into that midfield? Who's going to miss out? And obviously, the big game of the weekend, Liverpool-Chelsea. So lots to get into David Meyler with, which we'll do in just a moment's time. And then after that, we're going to be getting into the papers. There is a few interesting bits and pieces doing the rounds there today, but a lot of reflections and some lovely photographs that has to be said from Tala last night, where fans couldn't be there, but there was some lovely stuff, including Aaron Green getting the jersey of Ibrahimovic and giving it to what I thought was a very, very lucky fan, or a ball boy that managed to get into the ground, but it turned out it was his son. So, yeah. It's staying in the household, I suppose, is the point there. Alan Quinlan is going to join us at about 25 to 9 or thereabouts, and we'll be talking all things rugby with him. Get your questions in as you can for David Meyler, who I believe is on the line now. Morning to you, David.
Good morning.
How's the form?
I'm good, thank you. Yourself?
Flying, thanks, yeah. So much to get to with Liverpool-Chelsea, I think, primarily is kind of what we want to focus on, and we might just get straight into it with the signing of Thiago. I mentioned there Where does he fit in? Who misses out?
I think it's $1 million question, isn't it? You look at, the Liverpool's strongest midfield has probably always been Fabinho with Henderson and Wijnaldum. It's a case of, look, a player of his calibre can play as the deep line one, so he could go in for Fabinho, or he could go more advanced instead of Henderson or Wijnaldum. I think it's a great option for Jurgen Klopp to have. Look, they've always, wanted to strengthen their midfield, and, if you bring in players of his calibre, the level will only go up. So it's going to be important for the Liverpool players, because he's going to bring that new quality and some extra skill that maybe some of the Liverpool players don't have the same as him. But it'll be certainly interesting to see how he fits him into the team.
Yeah, I mean, there is that, and then there's also the breadth of talent that's there that obviously were rammed home to the Premier League last season. You mentioned some of them there, whether it's Henderson or Wijnaldum, Fabinho, Milner, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Keita coming back, and now he's in there. Is there any possibility that this ends up destabilising things a little bit? Because you can talk about competition for places and how much it drives players on, but at some point that becomes less important to many of those players, far less important than actually getting game time themselves.
Yeah, well, if you look at, Jurgen Klopp's track record, he's always found the right balance in, rotating players and giving players enough time. Of course, every footballer wants to play every minute of every game, but it's nearly impossible. There has been talks of, clubs inquiring about Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. You don't know, will he move on? Of course, James Milner is as fit as he is. He's another year older. Obviously, he either is in the last year of his contract or he signed a 1-year extension. I'm not 100% sure. But someone of Thiago, who is 30 now, it's exciting. It's a big player to come to Liverpool. He's just fresh off winning a treble at Bayern Munich, who was a mainstay in their team, but he felt he wanted a new challenge, and then to come to the Premier League. So that's the challenge that Jurgen Klopp faces. He's got all these excellent players who've been very successful over the last 3 seasons. Of course, in the first of those 3 they lost the Champions League final, but still to get there and then go on, win the Champions League, win the Premier League. It's a busy fixture list. Obviously, we know it's a shorter season this year, so there'll be plenty of games, and I imagine he'll rotate well.
It seems, David, over the last little while that Henderson, Wijnaldum and Fabinho have all had a very bespoke role in that midfield for Liverpool. Which of those 3 roles does Thiago and his attributes fit in best to?
Well, if you look at the last, serious competitive game Bayern Munich played, would be the Champions League final, and we saw Thiago playing as deep line, playmaker. He was getting the ball from the back 4, off the goalkeeper. So you're looking, really, is he going to go in as the deep line one in Fabinho's role? At times we've seen, Fabinho and Henderson swap. It's a tough one that, is he a lot better than Fabinho in that position? He probably adds different qualities. Look, he's very calm. He's assured on the ball. He's got an excellent range of passing. He's very skillful. I think the way Jurgen Klopp will do it, it's almost as if he's got Fabinho and Thiago for that position. Obviously, if the 2 were to pick up injuries, then Henderson can drop back in. But then I think it will become like Henderson, Keita in midfield, and then Wijnaldum, Milner and Oxlade-Chamberlain. I think he's almost looking at 2 players per position in midfield to kind of, keep it fresh, be able to rotate and keep a good balance.
So Thiago versus Fabinho, basically.
Well, if I had to pick one, I think it will be Thiago versus Fabinho, yeah.
Where would you obviously watched the game last weekend, and we all kind of left it, David, a bit surprised. Even listened to John Giles there just before the break, saying that they took him by surprise how good they were, and he's a man who knows a thing or two about Leeds generally. Where do you sit on it? Is it Leeds is suddenly got a challenge for the top 4, or conversely a bit of a blip for Liverpool in the opening? I mean, they won the thing, but a blip in terms of what we expected from them in the opening weekend.
I don't think Leeds will challenge for the top 4. No. I think they're a long way off that yet. I do believe they will be up around the 10th mark. I think they'll be very comfortable. I kind of expect them to do almost what Sheffield United did last year, where they take the league by storm. Obviously, if anyone watched the game, we were full of admiration for them. A lot of people will be quick to highlight that Liverpool, didn't play particularly well. Like, obviously Bamford's goal was Van Dijk's mistake, but I think we have to give more credit to Leeds in that they didn't leave Liverpool play well. They didn't leave them dominate the ball. I think Leeds took the game to them. Of course, Anfield is one of those stadiums where when the crowd is there, it's a lot different. And I think for Liverpool, they need to adjust to that a lot quicker than other teams will, playing at home. But going back to Leeds, I think, they're exciting. You looked at even the 75th, 88th minute, those players are still, breaking their lungs, making loads of runs. They look fit as probably the fittest team in the Premier League. So I think, they will be good value for money this year, and they will cause a lot of teams upsets.
How it translated this weekend obviously remains to be seen, but it's a fascinating matchup in some ways that I don't know what sort of a score prediction I'm on here, but you've got a team obviously who can't really defend against the counter-attack and a team who can't stop scoring on the counter-attack. It all points to one outcome.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? Results are hard to come by in this league, and if you can start to keep clean sheets or defend well, and then your forwards are producing goals and scoring goals, then you look like you can win games, and that's the most important thing, really.
The game this weekend, David, obviously has an added layer to proceedings with Frank Lampard's outburst on the sideline at the end of last season, Jurgen Klopp's comments 2 weeks ago, Lampard then hitting back at Klopp, saying his comments were slightly amusing. They've tried to deny that a real beef is emerging here. What do you think?
I think guys in the press make it out to be more than it actually is. If you looked at the game at Anfield, obviously there was the little back and forth between Frank and Jurgen. I think it's part and parcel. Both competitive men who want to win. These things boil down, and then obviously I know Jurgen's comments about being owned by an oligarch, in the sense that they can go and spend 200 million. But if you look at it, they had the transfer ban, they sold Hazard. They've more or less spent what they received. So it's just, I think Frank has more important things to be worrying about. I know they beat Brighton 3-1. I didn't think their performance was spectacular. If you looked at the goals they scored, Brighton turn over the ball pops into the box, Timo Werner's brought down. The second is an absolute screamer from Reece James. The third is a set piece. I feel the big thing Frank has is how long are these new players going to take to settle? We don't know, will it be now or the end of September, the start of October? They've brought in some very exciting players. I think Timo Werner will probably be huge for them. I think he'll score a lot of goals. But then he played Kai Havertz to the right. I'd like to see him probably play through the middle where Loftus-Cheek played. Obviously Ziyech is coming through, and then Thiago Silva. Does he come in for Zuma or does he come in for Christensen? And then it's just a case of, how these players get in and get settled, around the team. That's the big challenge he faces. And it will be a tough game against Liverpool. There's no doubt in that. But I think Liverpool's result against Leeds will almost give them kind of a kick up the backside to say, look, these are competitive games now. Everybody is coming for you. You're the team that everybody wants to beat. And I think Liverpool will go into that wanting to put a marker down. And of course, then Frank Lampard's thinking, this is the biggest test for us because they are Premier League champions.
The point on, I guess, how you actually managed to develop as a unit now and quite a young unit over the next couple of months is going to be very interesting. You mentioned Kai Havertz there. He didn't have a good debut, David. It was a tough night for him on Monday night. The question I would have about a player who comes in, he's 21 years of age, is where are the leaders going to be in that dressing room to, I guess, take Havertz under the wing and say, listen, it's going to be okay? Because it seems that they've cobbled together some outrageous talent here, but where are the leaders going to come from in these tough moments is a question I would certainly have.
And even if you look through the squad, I'd probably ask the same question. They're a very young side. Yes, Thiago Silva's coming in, but it's not as if he's, played with Kai Havertz before or what have you. Chelsea have always been renowned for, your John Terry, your Frank Lampard, Peter Cech, Drogba, that spine of the old Chelsea team. were big characters who you could probably turn on if, you know, things weren't going too well, if you weren't settling in. You often hear great stories of John Terry helping players out when they sign. You know, what do you need? Do your kids need to get into certain schools? He was meant to be fantastic with all little things like that. But then, like, you look at now, this team, it is very young. You know, Reece James, you know, Marcus Alonso probably won't play once Ben Chilwell is fit. So then you're looking at Zuma, Christensen, Rudiger. Like, of course, the big German three of Rudiger, Havertz and Werner, they'll probably lean on one another a lot. But then, like, Jorginho doesn't strike me as a character who's going to be too forthcoming outside of football. Yeah, he'll be in and around the training ground and helping fellas out. But, you know, of course, N'Golo Kante, who's the nicest man in the world, or the nicest footballer in the world, he's all smiles. But, you know, I think it's going to be a challenge for them players to pull around to, you know, help those young lads settle in, because there's no doubting their ability. They're all wonderful players, and we all want to see them do really well. But it's like I said, it goes back to what I originally said. It's how long is it going to take them to settle into that team?
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. It's also going to be a very interesting couple of weeks from a Tottenham perspective as well, David. We could have the second big signing of the week after Thiago completed in the next couple of days, which is Gareth Bale on loan to Tottenham. What I find interesting about this is that the thing that annoyed Jose Mourinho so much last week was that the team weren't pressing, that the team didn't have enough energy and that they were lazy. Do you believe that Gareth Bale will be able to bring that level of energy that Jose Mourinho is clearly crying out for?
Well, Gareth Bale has never been one for, you know, if you watched him over the years, never been one for the pressing. I think it's his individual skill has got him his move to Real Madrid and has got him his accolades at Madrid. I certainly think if Bale comes into that team, he's still going to need time. He's not played enough games over the last 18 months. He's not going to be able to hit the ground running. I think if any Spurs fan thinks that he will, it's unheard of. I think for Gareth, he's at a stage where he needs to play regular football. He's such an incredibly talented player. You know, we can all laugh and joke about, you know, him being on the golf course, whatever. We've seen the screenshot of some tea time with Daniel Levy this morning. So, look, I think he'll be a big impact for Tottenham. I think, you know, he'll come in and he'll be able to regenerate them in the sense that if he can get on the ball, he can free up other players, because he is a wonderfully gifted footballer. But at the same time, what Mourinho is looking for with the high press and going after teams, I'm not sure that that's playing to Gareth's strong points or some of the other players.
David, I can't believe that we know you got to go and do the school run, so we're going to let you off. But like Eoin asked you the question about beef on the sideline, another great opportunity to get into your own sideline spats, and you turned it down. It's we're not going to rerun that fun. Listen, thanks Willie for joining us.
No problem, gents. Thank you very much.
Take it easy. Cheers, David Meyler there. And I think we've got some good NFL goodness for our viewers.
It is another busy weekend of NFL action, and we'll bring up all the fixtures on screen right now. Of course, it's never just a busy weekend. It is essentially a busy half week. Last night, as ever, the NFL week got underway. Cleveland Browns getting the job done against the Cincinnati Bengals. Sorry if anybody was hoping to avoid the score this morning. Hopefully, I've given you time to block off your ears. It was 35-30 to the Browns, moving them to 1-1. This weekend, all eyes are going to be on Sunday Night Football, I reckon, as the Patriots go up against the Seahawks. Bill Belichick proving last week that he don't need no man called Tom Brady to actually keep up his incredible record. A huge win for them last Sunday, proving that Bill Belichick still has it, not that anybody doubted that. And the Seahawks, of course, racked up that big win against the Falcons, the second highest score on offense from any team last weekend. In the middle of the 6 o'clock kickoffs this weekend, though, everybody's going to be watching Tampa Bay once again. They're up against the Panthers. As we pose the question, will Tom Brady once again look like a 43-year-old man? Can he roll back the clock and look like a mere 41-year-old? So Raiders Saints on Monday, probably going to be a reminder of why Drew Brees is the next hotshot young quarterback that you need to keep an eye on in the post-Tom Brady era. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of eyes as well on Kansas City crushing the Chargers, and the Miami Dolphins probably finding a way of getting slaughtered by the Buffalo Bills. Plenty of other fixtures as well beside that. They're all on screen. And to snap, Our American football podcast is coming your way from 1 o'clock this afternoon on the OTB Sports app and across our social channels with Ger, Ronan and Keane. Meanwhile, if you're one of those people missing your dose of Gridiron news, game reaction and analysis, be sure to sign up to our American football newsletter, OTB Club Gridiron. We've got the latest off-season American football news and in-season, really, American football news from both Ireland and the USA from otbsports.com, as well as podcasts and long and short form video content, which is all included. You can subscribe at otbsports.com/Club Gridiron and enjoy all that OTB Club Gridiron has to offer. Adrian.
The other big thing from the David Meyler interview was that John Terry would get families sorted in the best schools. But how does that work? It's like the most Phil Hogan thing I've ever heard. It's like, he does the ring around and says, listen, it's John Terry here. Carvalho just landed in town and, his kids need a good school. Sort of bizarre.
It's if you're John Terry, you got to make good use of the facilities that you have in your vicinity for sure.
Right, OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. And by the way, don't forget even that if you don't have the OTB Sports app already, then search OTB Sports in your app store. Right, it is time for the papers.
OTB AM.
We're going to start with the Irish Examiner, and Zlatan living up to star billing on the night that deserved. Full house is the words of David Sneyd there on the front page, and that photograph of Ibra after scoring Milan style too much for brave Rovers, and reflections too on Dundalk's progress as they get it done last night. Andy Boyle sent off, but nevertheless got it done. 10-man Dundalk into the next stage of the Europa League. Bale jets in to rekindle Tottenham romance. And John Fogarty was a story there that we'll come back to in just a few moments' time. But the fixture list, GEA fixture list for the year ahead, that's the Irish Examiner this morning. Over in the Irish Times, has got that same photograph of Zlatan Ibrahimovic and the words of Emmett Malone there. Rovers left with heads held high as Milan's class wins out on the night, and reflections to the TV view, as always, from Mary Heneghan there. Macmillan strike secures Dundalk's safe passage in Andorra, and Thiago on the verge of $30 million deal to Liverpool. That's the Irish Times this morning. The Sun, shirt hits the fan, if you see what they've done there. And the photograph in the Sun this morning is a smiling Aaron Green and Zlatan Ibrahimovic as they exchanged jerseys last night. And a neat little photograph too that you'll see when you scan through the papers on your shelf if you're around the shop this morning, of Aaron Green handing his Zlatan jersey to what I thought initially was a random ball boy in the stand last night, but turns out it was his son, so it is staying in his house. And Tottenham just getting it done, as well as the other line there, as well as the reflections on Thiago as well. That's the Sun for you this morning. Meanwhile, in the Telegraph, Bale returns to Spurs to be, in inverted commas, in quote marks, happy again. Good photograph of Rory McIlroy from Wingfoot last night, an opening 67 for him, and news of Thiago there as well. That is on the Telegraph. And then meanwhile, over in the Guardian, winging his way, Bale jetting to complete a record-breaking Spurs return is the splash there, as well as a pretty good photograph of Jose Mourinho and Harry Kane last night, who were making that face that just kind of says, we were lucky to get a dodge there. And cycling has been silent on BLM, claims Kevin Reza, who's the only black rider in the Tour de France, and making his voice heard there on the back page of The Guardian this morning. The Irish Daily Mail, going broke is the headline across the top here. Rugby boss to reveal scale of IRFU cash crisis. The words of Rory Keane, and the news there that it could be up to 30 million as we stand, that the IRFU are set to lose amid the coronavirus pandemic. Bradley hails heroic coups meanwhile, and also that story of Aaron Green and his son Jack picking up the jersey last night. TFI Fly Day is from the Irish Daily Star this morning. That's both Gareth Bale and Thiago flying in to seal their new deals there. Rover and out is the news from Tala last night. And one line here that I haven't seen, and probably came out a bit late last night to make a lot of the back pages this morning, but that the FAI new CEO is said to be a chap by the name of Jonathan Hill, who will mean absolutely nothing to most people, but he's a former FA executive, was commercial director there for a period of time, brought in, I understand, upwards of 400 million quid during his time there, so I'm sure that was an attractive aspect to his CV. The Murphy this morning, shutted Gary, writes Keith Jackson here. This is Shane Duffy responding to Gary Breen's comments. Actually, he's not really responding to Gary Breen's comments, he's responding to I think what's been misinterpreted as Gary Breen's comments, but nevertheless having a say on that. Good Friday, and then also that's the news of Thiago and Bale, and then reflections from Tala last night. Klopp's 20 million Thiago coup is on the Times London edition this morning. Elsewhere, the Racing Post back on target. Fans to turn out for the World Series finals of darts on the continent this weekend. That's the Racing Post. The Irish Independent this morning also has that news of Jonathan Hill to be named the new FAI CEO. The words there from John Fallon, and pictures too from Tala last night as Zlatan gets that strike away. And Colm Keys has some news there about lunchtime starts for a couple of games in the Championship over the weekend of the Championship when that gets restarted. So that is a flavour of what's gone across the back pages for you this morning. On plenty of interesting bits and bobs there. There was a couple maybe that we might touch on briefly. The GA particularly, so the news that are just around the fixture list, John Fogarty and the Examiner, the Allianz Leagues will be run off in 2021, they're saying, certainly as things stand, and still some uncertainty around that. The inter-county season obviously wrapping up on December the 19th, league starts then in February, and the talk there by John Fogarty that there'll be 4 football divisions that'll which already exist. They'll be divided into 2 groups each of 4 teams apiece, so they'll run them off that way. Club month of April probably comes out. Football provincial championship stay put for now, and then I suppose in the overall sense it's a battle between what the GAA would like to achieve in the long run if there wasn't a pandemic ongoing, and then ultimately, which is I guess the most likely scenario, what they'll actually be able to do given the conditions.
It's tough, isn't it? I think that in John Fogarty's piece as well, he talks about how the GPA have had a central role in this, and one of their draft proposals for a championship structure going forward is to do away with provincial championships. I think that makes sense. I think that the provincial championships almost are, I guess, symptomatic of some of the wider inconsistencies we have with how the great championship football in particular used to be, that the provincial championships just have not been good in recent times. The Leinster Football Championship, for example, is probably the most foregone conclusion of a sports competition that we know in the world at the moment, and doing away with something like that might not be a bad idea, but the reality is, how easy will that be? And it's not going to be easy whatsoever, and his piece touches on that attracting support from delegates at Congress has to be a part of the way you think about this, which is an unfortunate reality of how the GAA operates, but it is still the reality. So what we're going to have is a couple of different split season motions going into Congress, you'd imagine, next year, and they will all include the protection of the provincial championships. For as long as the provincial championships exist, there's only so much you can do to actually get to a place where everybody's happy with the structures, I would have thought. But this is the kind of the hands they've been dealt. Like the split season, it's probably not going to be a thing next year. Like, I know we have it this year, but they feel that aiming for 2022 might be more realistic than aiming for next year. And as you mentioned, then just kind of a more compressed Allianz Leagues is how they might do it, by just essentially dividing the divisions in 2. That's going to be one way how they're going to compress the next season. So my overall feeling on this is that there's going to be a lot more frustration with how the GAA structures exist before we actually get to a place where everybody's happy with it. Sure, this is a positive thing, what's happened over the last couple of months, that we've actually seen that the club championship on its own can stand out in summer, and it's been relatively vibrant. Like, without fans, it's never going to get to that level, but it's been a bit of a success, I think, in a lot of different counties, and that has been a positive for sure, but capitalising on it is the next thing, and I don't think we're going to see that happen until the year after next, from what we're reading this morning anyway.
Yeah, it's just all so uncertain, and like there's nothing, I know we're both in agreement at this point, as boring as like speculating about something that could utterly change in 2 weeks' time, but alas, they are the possibilities that are on the table for the GA. And the other one to touch on there is the possibility of a couple of lunchtime starts for the championships across the weekend. Like, it's funny, geez, you already thought, I certainly already thought sort of pre-COVID, that my life was pretty full of sport. Like, at every hand's turn there was another game to watch, and whether it was leagues or sports were filling all the gaps that used to exist in a sporting calendar. There used to be a bit of peak and trough, a bit of a downtime. Everybody seemed to agree, either officially or unofficially, that there'd be, like a month or 6 weeks at some point where everybody would sort of down tools, and that would be that. But and they were increasingly failed. But now, like trying to have a life, and from anything from GA club matches where there's some lad on the sideline with his mobile phone out, to like, as I've been watching over the last number of weeks, like ERV TV, or the national broadcaster obviously snapping up rights, as we see with some games upcoming. Now Colin Keys is writing that we're looking at a couple of lunchtime starts at the weekend, and I'm concerned about what level of life I'm going to be able to have when all this sport is on from morning, noon and night.
Yeah, well, it's the positive. One of the positives is that it's temporary, but how temporary it is, well, it's probably until the World Cup in 2022. So you're stuck in this holding pattern for the next well over 2 years, Adrian. So say goodbye to your life. Early 2023, you might be able to clear the decks a little bit. I
wonder actually about how much of it. Some of this is going to get left even out the other side, isn't it? Like some people will go, "Oh, Jesus, that 12 o'clock start on Saturday for a championship game was absolutely perfect. But let's do that with fans." Like it doesn't take much to change a culture without getting back into the how long is coronavirus going to last conversation.
No, it doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. And I think that I think Irish people in particular would love the idea of going to a match at 12 o'clock in the afternoon and having the day to yourself after that, especially on a Saturday afternoon. Start the weekend off with a 12 o'clock throw in somewhere, and sure, the weekend is your own after that. You can even go to another match if there's one in the locale. Like, it does definitely make sense to plug all these gaps. It makes sense from a marketing perspective. The GAA now have a massive opportunity to try something out this winter, and that is to try out staggered throw-in times at various different times throughout the weekend. Like, well, it's going to be local games. Like, we're starting off with a provincial championship in both codes, let's not forget. So we will have local derbies. Why not try out a few of those on a Friday night? You could definitely do 3 and 3 on a Saturday and a Sunday. Maybe not 3 on a Sunday. Maybe you want to be finished up earlier on a Sunday afternoon. But trying to actually plug all these gaps that might exist is a doable thing. I know that they'll be going up against pretty much every other sport under the sun when the championship finally does get underway. But the broadcast deals that exist, it looks like they might now be malleable, where either RTE and Sky end up getting a lot more bang for their buck, they get more games, or else county boards will be allowed to stream games themselves. Either way, the GAA now have a possibility of making way more content available for the public than has ever been the case. That is something that you can twist into a positive so easily, and I just hope that is the case. I hope they don't just go, well, we'll cram 15 fixtures together at 3:30 on a Sunday afternoon. Well, it'll be 2:30, given it'll be the winter, and that'll be that. I just hope they don't do that. I hope they actually look at this thing as an overall sense. What will the GAA weekend look like when it comes to the leagues, when it comes to the championships, and how can we put our best product out there? Because it's a great opportunity.
I want to mention this guy here because he's across a lot of the newspapers, and I was going through some programs yesterday. Hopefully you can see that there. But big news that Gareth Bale, and that's pretty young looking Gareth Bale. He's got a little bit older since then. He hasn't played a huge amount of football actually since that photograph was taken. Is he a bit mad going to Tottenham? Like, it looks as if it's happening now, and we don't know how strong the Manchester United links were, but like Tottenham, and you see it again last night. Like, the headlines this morning are Gareth's been brought in to save Tottenham from this hell they're in. Like, they scraped through last night's fixture, and Jose Mourinho and Harry Kane, with the photographs you see this morning, look pretty glum with the performance and with each other. And like, it's he I suppose no option. It's probably, trying to get away from the situation at Real Madrid, I'm sure, is despite having sat on the bench for the last while making binoculars signs, I'm sure trying to get out of there is probably high on his priority. But like, Tottenham does, obviously the obvious relationship, but God, there must be somewhere better for him. It's
maybe Tottenham, I don't think the Manchester United thing would have made sense from Manchester United's perspective. I think that if they were to go out and sign Jadon Sancho now, I think that makes sense because they've got somebody who they can invest a lot of years in. You can't invest a lot of years in Gareth Bale. Gareth Bale is, at worst, a plaster, at best, an excellent short-term solution. And I think he can be an excellent short-term solution. Tottenham needs something quick because, on the evidence of last Sunday, they are not going anywhere fast under Jose Mourinho in their current setup. What'll be interesting is when they get the signing of Reguilon done today as well. I think that might almost be the more important signing that Tottenham will get over the line today. I think they're both going to be completed this afternoon at some point. That'll allow them to completely change their system. Like we saw Matt Doherty last Sunday, and like I'm going to say that Matt Doherty I actually thought was Tottenham's most impressive performer last Sunday. I know he got a bit of stick off Jose Mourinho after the game. Maybe that's Jose Mourinho using psychology in a positive way. Maybe he thinks that showing a stick rather than a carrot to Matt Doherty is the way of getting the best out of him. And I don't actually have too much of a problem with how Jose Mourinho spoke about him after the game. I actually thought he was very good. I think if you look at the other flank and what Tottenham are doing down the other flank, it just isn't very impressive. Like Ben Davies is a defender and that's it. He's not a Matt Doherty attacker, whereas the new signing in Reguilon will be an attacker. This will allow Matt Doherty to share the load down the opposite side of the pitch, and maybe even Jose Mourinho will go to a back three. So what we're about to see here is Jose Mourinho potentially being at a new crossroads in his career where he rips up everything that he believed for the last couple of years and entirely overhauls his system. And then the question would be, where does Gareth Bale play in this system? If they are going to get the best out of these two brand new, shiny wing-backs, because let's not forget that they're not full-backs, they are wing-backs. If they're to get the best out of them, Gareth Bale is going to have to play in a central area. Heung-min Son will have to play in a central area. Harry Kane already is playing in a central area. And I'm immediately getting excited about that. I could be eating my words in a couple of weeks. I'm sure I will be. But I'm immediately excited by the prospect of a narrow front three of Heung-min Son, Harry Kane and Gareth Bale. Adrian, I think this thing could actually be a success. The more I think about it, if that's the way Jose moves, I think this thing could be a success. If it doesn't, though, it won't just be a mediocre failure. It will be a spectacular failure because Gareth Bale is getting half of his wages paid by Tottenham, but still will be the highest paid player in the Tottenham dressing room of Tottenham's wages alone. So Tottenham are going to pay 300 grand of a 600 grand a week wages. That 300 alone still makes him the highest paid player in the Tottenham dressing room. If he isn't pulling his weight around the dressing room in training, on the pitch in this pressing game that Jose Mourinho was so married to after his quotes on Sunday, then you can expect that the dressing room won't be a happy place. So it's going to be exciting. If you're a Tottenham fan, you have to be delighted with this news. The two signings today are excellent on paper. And my suspicion is that it will work out well for them. But if it doesn't, God, it's not going to be boring.
I'm going with the spectacular failure one, by the way. You've really talked me into this thing just imploding for Tottenham. Like, you're talking about Jose Mourinho embracing a new system and turning over a new leaf. Like, these are things that we don't really associate with Jose Mourinho. Like, and actually, as you were discussing even there, like when you look at the likes of Harry Kane and Dele Alli, like who knows about the future for him? Like,
Ali's gone.
They had the potential.
In this imaginary system that I imagine Jose Mourinho going to, I think a lot of people have actually speculated Dele Alli, there's no place for him.
Yeah, and that's a big deal for Tottenham. And I think that those two players had the potential to be the Terry and Lampard of their club. And like at the minute, it looks like getting out of Tottenham for as a career move is the best possible thing. Never mind about going into it. Like it's or that there's some sort of, like, has Gareth Bale got some sort of assurances that, listen, Jose is not going to be here. He's not going to be here forever. Like he's, I don't know. Jose Mourinho in a way that would have been at one point very attractive to a player to join the club, and you know, I just think that ship has long since sailed. I admire your positivity about Mourinho is going to turn over a new leaf. He's going to introduce a new system. He's going to be reinvigorated. He's going to inspire the players around him. He's going to bring everybody on this great path. They're going to drive for the top four. But I just don't see any evidence of it.
Well, I think he kind of has to. I think he's been backed into a corner at this point. We all know what Jose Mourinho has done over the course of the last season as a result of this documentary. The Emperor has no clothes to a certain point, and he's now got to manoeuvre himself in a way that I guess he tries to dispel a lot of doubts that exist around him at the moment. And it's just to go back to that thing that he said last week, that his team weren't pressing well enough. Like, that comes back to the manager. That is, it just seems like such a strange thing to harp on about at the time, because for me, that is up to the manager to arrest that, to change that. And if your players, you feel, aren't working hard enough to press, then I think you have to change the system somewhat. The two signings that they're going to make today would allow them to do that seamlessly. Now, of course, you look at that Richarlison chance last Sunday, and you see Toby Alderweireld kind of running after him at half pace, even though he was going full pelt, you'd have to worry about other elements of their team and the age profile of that defence potentially. But I think he just has to do something. I think it's either going to end miserably or else he's going to go down fighting, and maybe for the first time you'll actually see a humble Jose Mourinho.
I won't hold my breath on that one. And it should be said on the Doherty one, like, he wasn't, I don't know if people have sort of, in the way that they might have done with Gary Breen, misinterpreted what he said, but my understanding of what he said was that he wasn't fit. And like, we were only saying the week previous that the entire Ireland squad wasn't fit. So like, maybe that's not the greatest stretch of the imagination. And you know, I know you were looking at some of the reaction of his performance last night, which seemed to be pretty grim as well. So yeah, it'll be interesting times. Certainly it'll be interesting times anyway, we can say that, to watch Tottenham over the next while. Before we wrap, I must mention as well, up on OTBsports.com this morning, lots of good stuff up there, plenty of stories from Nathan's chat with Ian Wright and Sol Campbell up there, including I was rollerblading through the marble halls and he caught me. The words of Ian Wright in relation to Arsene Wenger and his impact on him at the club is great things to say too about Dennis Bergkamp. Righty, I don't want any banter bollocks on working with Roy Keane, he says there. The Robbie Brady penalty, there was a shootout last night against Sheffield United in the Carabao Cup, and Burnley go on through, I think, to the third round now. 5-4 they win on penalties. David McGoldrick scored for Sheffield United, and I think might have come off injured in that game. The reflections too on Nathan's interview with Mark Tye last night on the release of the new book, Champagne Football. Any kind of dissent from the fans was crushed, he says, in relation to the former FAI CEO John Delaney. And news this morning of a new full-time one, and Bradley Maldini was full of praise for how Rovers took on Milan. He's the sporting director, isn't he, at AC Milan now, Paolo Maldini, and was in the stands last night and full of praise for the host. So that's up on otbsports.com, and that is the papers for you this morning. Right, we're going to turn our focus now. Do keep your comments coming into us, by the way. We're with you until 10 o'clock, and we've lots to come. We're going to speak to the new Connacht president, and Heneghan, upcoming. Ruth Fahy's thoughts on Germany against the Republic of Ireland tomorrow lunchtime, and then a little later on, Joe Molloy is going to join us to talk all things US Open, so that's coming your way in a little bit, and plenty of comments coming in. Do keep them coming in. Alan Quinlan is en route to preview the weekend's Heineken Cup action. Before that, Brian O'Driscoll on the show last night. He had some thoughts on who Leo Cullen should opt for at hooker for Leinster this weekend's that game against Saracens.
These are tiny margins that can be sorted out. I think personally that it would be a bit harsh on Keller. I don't think he's done a huge amount wrong other than that. But you know, we've seen with Sean Cronin in the past that, you know, ultimately his international career really suffered because his darts didn't work in that Italian game a couple of seasons ago. And it's the focal point of Leinster's launch play. They score more tries off line out than any other team in the competition. They look to get themselves into the game by the quality of possession, particularly when you've got a guy at 6'10" calling the line out. You've got the capability of Ryan and Doris in there as well, Jack Conan. You've got lots of options, so there should be no reason that you can't win your possession. And if they can get good quality, particularly off four and at the back, I think they can get into. I think they can get into Saracens. They can get into Good if he's playing 10, or Vunipola, Manu Vunipola, who they might select there. So I think you'll be looking at just being massively aggressive and getting into Saracens immediately. And the knock-on effect is Leinster just get into their rhythm. I think their phase play is better than lots of other sides, and that's probably a big differential between them and most of the teams in the Pro 14 and a lot of teams in the Champions Cup. Is their phase play and their ability to manipulate defences is more impressive, and that's where they get their line breaks, and that's where they finish their scores.
If you're in the selection meeting, who are you picking it to?
I'm picking Kelleher still. I think you know, a bad performance. We haven't seen much. We haven't seen, you know, poor throwing to that degree or poor line out malfunction like that previously. So I think you know, he's entitled to another go because of what he also brings from a ball carrying perspective. Not that Sean Cronin doesn't, but you know, why wouldn't you potentially sit someone like Sean Cronin on the bench then? He's a brilliant explosive player to bring on.
Interesting stuff from Brian. You can check out that full piece OTBsports.com for that full thing. Alan Quinlan, good morning to you.
Morning, lads. How are you?
Flying the thanks yet. Looking forward to weekend of quality rugby, Quinny. And a lot of the focus, obviously, in this game from a long way out has been in relation to Eoin Farrell and his absence. Apparently, he's been running Johnny Sexton plays. If we believe what we hear in training this week, he's been replicating the Leinster at half and what he might bring to the game. So he's replaced by Alex Good. It seems he's a 15 naturally. Good on the front foot. Obviously, can't control. Few players can, but can't control the game in the way that Farrell might. So just in relation to Farrell's absence, then Quinny, and how much of a dent that is, one that Saracens can recover from or no?
I'm not sure. I think Alex Good, as you said, is a very talented player, and but when you take Eoin Farrell as world class, he's probably the best, one of the best, if not the best fly half in world rugby. His presence, his aggression, his physicality, all that kind of stuff makes Saracens, and he's a real leader for them. It makes them, it makes them tick really, and he's done brilliantly in that role for England and Saracens the last number of years. So he's a big loss. There's no doubt about it. It looks like Good will play at 10. Mano Vunipola is the other option, but I think they'll go for the more experienced. That's what we're hearing. So he's a loss. I think his presence obviously is very important to Saracens, and in the training week and stuff like that. You mentioned Johnny Sexton and him not starting for Ulster the week before, or for the Ulster game the week before, and being around the team and stuff like that. It does have an effect, but ultimately it's what happens out in the field under pressure, and Farrell is really good under pressure, so he's a massive loss to them.
Yeah, does like with a player of that sort of significance, and they've obviously been without him now for a week or whatever, it's been 10 days, and have known about it, and so maybe they can tweak the game plan. But how much tweaking of the game plan do they do? Do they just say, listen, this is the way we play, and we might not have the same quality in terms of driving the game or controlling the game at 10, but we got to stick with that? Or do they try and tailor it to a different quarterback?
I don't think Saracens are going to change dramatically from what's been brought them success in the last couple of years. The personnel, obviously, from that final in May 2019 is going to be a bit different. There's probably 10 or 11 guys who were in the 23 that day who are not going to be involved. They're not going to be there. They're gone. They're moved on. Some of them are departed for good, some on loan. So it's a little bit different, but I don't think they're going to completely change the way they play. They play with a lot of pressure, use the kicking game very effectively, quite direct in their approach. And they try to out-muscle teams. Of course, they have, pace in their wings. Maitland and Lewington are very, very dangerous. Elliot Daly, if he gets enough a ball in his hands, can be very, very daily as well. But Saracens like to play a lot of territory, and Alex Good's kicking game wouldn't be as sharp and as accurate as Farrell. And it's those decisions under pressure is really important. It's what Farrell is very good at. So, in a sense, this is kind of the last shot for them. They go down into the championship next year. They'd love nothing more than to win the Champions Cup and really give the two fingers to everybody who's criticised them and called them cheats and, been negative towards them. So I think they're a very dangerous prospect.
Being realistic yes. Towards them, I suppose.
That's what they are, yeah. That's what they are.
So just one last one on that 10. Like, we can't talk about Good as being some sort of greenhorn. Like, is he 30 odd, and he's like a player with 20 international caps under his belt. So, like, he's a player of experience. But at the same time, you talk about like making decisions under pressure. Like, I presume if you're Leo Cullen and Stuart Lancaster heading into this year, like deploying your back row to barrel down that channel for the first 10, 15 minutes and put him back in his backside.
Yeah, you want to unsettle him. It's everybody does that with any fly half, I think, and that's what Leinster will do. They will try and. I think it's more the pressure game. We saw Van der Fleer shooting out of the line last week. It's just having somebody in his face as often as possible, and then forcing some errors from his kicks. Obviously, trying to run at him when you have the ball as well. So. Saracens will be conscious of that, and you always try and protect your fly half no matter what. You want him standing on his feet, even if it is Eoin Farrell and he loves to tackle. The more times he gets the ball on his feet, moving, being able to look up. The great thing about Farrell is he makes really quick, good decisions on the fly, on the run. He likes to run kick a lot of the time, so he's hitting the ball full tilt, and he does a lot of punch kicks into the corner and in for space in behind. So Good is a very footballer and a very good footballer. Make no mistake about it. If he gets enough of quality ball, he's very, very dangerous. He's a running fly half more than a kicking fly half. So I think that's the rock they could perish on if they think that, there's a massive weakness here and we can just solely focus on him, because there's a lot of quality in that Saracen side anyway. And Leinster have got to take away any sort of momentum that they generate. They're a very similar team to Leinster in a sense. They take control of the tempo of the game very, very well, and that's what their success has been built on. And that's where they're dominant. When you're dominant, you can do that in rugby. So that'll be really intriguing, the physical kind of battle. Who has that tempo? Leinster have been unsettling the last couple of weeks themselves at the breakdown and a couple of line-out issues. So Saracens will target them as well. But obviously, you go after fly halves a lot. You go after scrum halves. You try and unsettle them because they're the main distributors and decision makers for any team.
What's the fix on the line-out issue, Alan? Is it the hooker? Is it who's calling the line-out? What's going on here? I
think it's a mixture, Eoin. It's not a technique issue where Ronan Kelleher can't throw the ball into the line-out. Of course he can throw the ball in. It's just, I suppose it's a composure and a calmness when the pressure's on, when you've got to make decisions, when the opposition are kind of shouting and roaring and moving in the line-out, and they're throwing players up in the air. For me, looking at Leinster's line-out, and it wasn't that many, it's not that big of an issue, I don't think. It's just a timing issue, and it's a concentration issue with them. It's not about simplifying the line-out and just throwing it at two all the time. It's just making good line-out calls, and there's an onus on whoever's calling the line-out, whether that's James Ryan or Devin Toner or, Scott Farley, who plays in the second row, we're not sure yet. But who's calling the line-out, there's a clear and precise picture. And a lot of the time when your line-out malfunctions a little bit and you have a couple of issues, it's usually fixed the following week in training by really refocusing everybody, not just the line-out callers, the jumpers, but the lifters as well. So collectively, I think they will have addressed that, and that problem should be sorted out. You're always going to lose one or two in a game if the opposition are good at putting bodies in the air. And Itoje certainly, he's very vocal. He moves up and down a lot. Michael Rhodes can be lifted. Whether Swinson starts or who plays in the second row with Itoje it will be interesting. But they'll certainly try and pressurise Leinster. And, it'll be interesting to see if Leinster can fix that this week.
Yeah, and on that point, because we'd spoken even last weekend about Leinster not necessarily hitting their straps since the return, maybe a little bit more at the weekend, but again, the line-out kicking, is that the weakness? I was going to ask you, what is the weakness of this Leinster team if you're Mark McCall plotting here? Is that what it is? Is that what you're focusing on, or are there other areas that you think can be exposed? Haven't seen them since their return.
Yeah, again, it's an area you can be let down, because you look at the Munster match. Munster profited very much so on the kicking game in the first match, and then they focus a lot on that in the second game in the semi-final, and Leinster were very good at receiving it and catching it and blocking and retreating. So you can get kind of bogged down on focusing too much on a weakness that we've seen in a previous match, and then the team fixes it, and then you go, well, they're not supposed to be good at this, and suddenly they're good at it. So you've got to be very, very careful. I think all aspects of any sort of performance in rugby is important. The set piece is your fundamental part of the game that gives you your foundation. The line-out and the scrum, Leinster have got to make sure their line-out's a lot better, because that enables their attack game to really get the ball into Gary Ringrose's hands early, get him moving with a bit of width, and attacking off a very good platform. So they've got to get that right. Of course, if they start creaking early on, it can have a real negative effect and a downward spiral. But the other area for me is the breakdown. And even though Leinster haven't kind of changed gears and gone up into fourth or fifth gear, they've got to be a bit better at resourcing their own breakdown. Munster caused them a lot of problems and turned the ball over, slowed the ball down, and it was sloppy at times.
What does that mean, Quinny, to getting numbers in, is it?
Yeah, I just think it's the ball carrier. Again, there's an onus on the ball carrier, but it's also an enthusiasm and an energy to get in there and support players and realise that there's a serious threat there. Well, Jackson Ray is very good at the breakdown. Billy Vunipola, Michael Rhodes. Itoje is an absolute nuisance. So he really refocuses you and gets you alert to what's coming there at the breakdown. So Leinster, if they get good quality ball, and they've proven and shown us that in the last couple of years, that they're very, very hard when their resourcing of the breakdown is of a high standard. That's where they cause massive problems for teams, because it's very hard to get your defensive line, and it's what every team tries to do. Quick breakdown, defence doesn't get set, and then you can play rugby and gaps open up. If the breakdown is slow, the defensive line gets set, no matter what the level of the opposition, and they can run off the line and smash you and be physical, and then there's knock-ons, turnovers, the ball becomes loose, and it can have a negative effect. But you know, Saracens are really going to target them in that area, and I think that's an area where Leinster need to get better. Their own resourcing of the ball and the numbers they send in, and that sometimes that's an identification issue. You know, in that semi-final against Munster, they looked at times where they got 3-4 phases. They had Munster under massive pressure, and then Munster in their own 22 or outside their 22, when Leinster looked like building a little bit of momentum, Munster was kind of hanging on. Munster forced a turnover or a knock-on, and you just feel the frustration watching it. And you can imagine what that's like as a player when you have a number of positive moments. You look like you're nearly getting there, and then these bloody guys have turned us over again, or we've made a mistake, or somebody's lost their concentration. So that's an area, you know, Munster or Leinster are capable of building 10, 12, 15 phases. We've seen that, and that's where they cause a lot of damage, and they do a lot of damage. And these top games and these big games, that's where you got to keep going. You got to be patient in holding on to the ball, and that's where they've got to get to on Saturday. Of course, you can score a first, second, third phase if somebody does something brilliant and the opposition switch off. But realistically, that's where they want to get to, into the double fingers of holding on to the ball, and then they'll get opportunities.
Yeah, these games tend to take on a bit of a life of their own, don't they, in terms of like the Irish-English thing. And I was listening to the BBC Rugby podcast this week, and they were talking about the Pro 14 being the equivalent of the Scottish Premiership in football. To be fair, the Scottish Premiership has been taken in the neck, left, right and centre this week. But they were saying that like that dominance, that Leinster dominance now is a bit like the Celtic dominance, which I think is a bit unfair. Like, we're talking about a team of a generation rather than what's like outside of the top one, maybe two in Scotland, just being of poor quality. Which is the Gallagher Premiership or the Pro 14 the better tournament for quality?
We can't argue. I can't argue here and sit here. And the reality is, there's Pro 14 games without the internationals at times throughout the season. Of course, there's meaningful games, but not enough of them for me. I think it's a hard situation to fix, because we'd love to see the internationals playing all the time. In the Pro 14, it's not possible. We have a situation the last number of years where Munster and Leinster, which is one of the biggest derby games in club rugby for me in the world, is you see no huge number of changes and internationals not playing. So we, as Pro 14 people, if you like, we can't sit here and say, well, you're wrong and the English Premiership is wrong and the quality here is way better. The quality is good if they all play, but the reality is they don't play often enough, and we get lots of games where we don't see the internationals. So there's an argument there that's very valid, that the quality isn't the same. I think if you put up Leinster, Munster, Ulster, Connacht against the English Premiership sides, Leinster, Ulster and Connacht, win a lot of those games. Munster win a lot of those games. Leinster probably win all their games at the moment. But it's just when their top team is out. The Gallagher Premiership, I think there's an intensity to it, and there's a relentless intensity that they play every week. They play a lot more minutes, their internationals over there. So that's where they're coming from as regards the intensity and the bite that's there week after week. We don't get that in the Pro 14, and that's just a reality. So it's a very relevant argument that, you know, the week before lots of European games, and we've seen it over the years, the Irish provinces are able to rest their players, where the guys in the Premiership teams, they just can't do that, or in France at times as well.
What about the Ulster game this weekend, Quinny? What are you thinking? It's like there's a doubt over Coetzee, which might be the most pivotal thing here, but they're off to Toulouse. Raj got a look at them last weekend, and it didn't go that well for him. I don't know if you've been chatting to him, but like, what's your sense of how that one goes?
Well, look, Toulouse are very dangerous. You look at the teams they played in the last couple of weeks. There's no real changes in who they've had last year. They haven't signed a raft of guys. They're a very, very dangerous side, a powerful side as well. And if they get their flow, they can destroy any team. I just get a sense that Ulster have a chance here, not based on form, but based on ability, if that makes sense. I think the free-flowing kind of style and game that we're going to see on Sunday will actually suit Ulster. That the ball has been thrown around a little bit, and they won't have the same kind of pressure that they had last weekend against Leinster. The same sort of organisation. I'm not saying Toulouse are a bad defensive side, but Toulouse, and it's a kind of a French thing, really. They still believe they'll score more than you, even if you score against them. So they're very, very attack focused. If Ulster are solid and connected in defence, and they defend well together and stay in the game, you know, they can score tries. They can create chaos for Toulouse, but there are a lot of ifs and buts there. The reality is it's very, very unlikely that they'll get a win, but I think they have a real opportunity here to throw the kitchen sink at this in a way, in an ambitious way, if you like. If they go thinking they're going to contain Toulouse and sit back and just, you know, not have a go themselves, it's not going to work for them. I think it will suit them the way the game will pan out, that they have an ability to score tries. And in fairness, even against Leinster last week, you could see they were building lots and lots and lots and lots of phases, and they were maybe one offload or one pass away from getting that clean line break or maybe scoring that try. Toulouse's defence is not as good as Leinster. That's the reality. So if they can do the same things, particularly what they did in the first half last week, and if they get a try or two and get a bit of confidence in themselves, they have a really good chance.
And what way are you going for both of those? How are you calling it?
It'll be Leinster-Toulouse, I think. That's the reality. I think there, of course, and this, I think most people know this, Saracens are a very, very dangerous situation for Leinster. And if Leinster underestimate him in any way or underperform or don't increase their level of performance, they're actually vulnerable. There's a vulnerability there, because the issue for Saracens is, and that what happened in that final last year was the impact off the bench, the power that they can bring off the bench. Saracens won't be able to bring the same sort of power off the bench. So Leinster have got to be physical and really kind of bring the pain threshold up to a level that Saracens just feel that they wear them out, basically. You know, the Vunipolas and the Toja, as I said, and Jackson Ray and Jamie George, these are, you know, top quality players who won't be daunted by, you know, what's happened before, what Leinster have won 25 games. They'll be fancying their chances. So I think it'll be tight. And the longer Saracens are in the game, if they're in the game late on in the game, I think that makes them more dangerous. So I think Leinster need to get the scoreboard taken over with penalties, if it is penalties. And, you know, Leinster don't have to get this wonderful game tomorrow. They just need to win, play cup rugby, play in the right areas. And if that means knocking the ball over with penalties, fair enough. It doesn't matter, because they just need to win the game and simplify things at times. You'd love to see their attack going up a level. And like I said about the breakdown, if their breakdown is good, they can do that. So I think Leinster will get over the line. And there's just some part of me thinks Ulster have a great chance, but the reality is it'll probably be Toulouse. So it'll be Leinster.
You're covering all bases there, Quinny.
I'm not. I'm picking Toulouse to win, and I'm picking Toulouse to win. But I just think I'd love to be a Ulster player. You know, I love these matches are going away when people write you off and you're going to the south of France, and you know the atmosphere, and there'll be the crowd. I'm not sure how many they're going to let into it in France. There'll be a couple of hundred or a couple of thousand, but it's not going to be a rollicking stadium where the crowd are kind of hanging over the wire, and so it neutralises that home advantage a little bit. But Toulouse are a wonderful side. Chelsea Colby, if he gets the ball, he can destroy any team. We know what he can do. Dupont at scrum half is probably the best scrum half in the Northern Hemisphere. You know, they've got Kanu, some wonderful players there, Ramos, Huge. You know, you can rattle off all the internationals, the quality they have. So, you know, that kind of refocuses you and thinks, well, they can't do it.
Yeah, we shall see. We'll hold you to your feet to the flames next week, Quinny. Thanks a million.
Cheers, lads.
Thanks a lot, Alan Quinlan. Looking ahead to the weekend's Heineken Cup action and calling it for Leinster and Toulouse. So we'll see how that pans out. We're going to keep it rugby next. We're talking to the new Connacht Rugby president on the way after these.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Brady and Belichick have been at the forefront of the credit in New England for the last 20 years.
OTB's American Football Show, The Snap on OTB Sports Radio.
Burrow very much thrown in the deep end. He seems to have the correct temperament. I've never been totally won over by his actual talent, to be honest.
Keep updated with American football on OTB. Tune into The Snap every Friday on OTB Sports Radio.
As we learn to live with COVID-19, sport and fitness for your family are more important than ever. At the Sport Ireland campus in Blanchardstown, our facilities aren't just for elite athletes, but the community as well. So, for European Week of Sport, we're hosting an open week from September 24th for families to try out a new sport and fitness experience together. So join Dad for gymnastics or Mum for rugby with over 20 different options. Check sportirelandcampus.ie for more.
Into sports.
20 yards out, Ursa shoot, don't shoot! Oh, what a goal for Favino! Wow!
Then get into the all-new OTB Sports app.
I think when he apologises to me, I probably will say hello to him, yeah. No.
Videos, sports news, live scores, interviews.
If Fabregas is going to come up to me in the street and give me some of the mouth that he would have given me on a football pitch, what would he get a slap?
Plus, exclusive content on the OTB Podcast Network. The biggest names in sports, ready when you are. Search OTB Sports on your app store and download it now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Yeah, it's OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. And if you don't have the OTB Sports app, by the way, it's the easiest, handiest place to get all the good stuff. So just head into your app store and search for OTB Sports. So that's that. Also a reminder too, by the way, that lots of live and exclusive commentary coming your way on OTB over the next few days from the Premier League and the Heineken Champions Cup as well. We'll be on air at the earlier time on Sunday at 12:30. Full commentary there of Ulster up against Toulouse in that Champions Cup quarter. Commentary there from Neil Tracy. We'll be in the company of Bernard Jackman. And then from 4:30, Chelsea against Liverpool, big game of the weekend. Nathan Murphy and Kenny Cunningham on duty for that one. Now we're staying with rugby, or going back to rugby. Delighted to say we're joined on the line by the new president of Connacht Rugby, Anne Heneghan. Good morning to you, Anne.
Morning.
Congratulations on the job, first of all. The first thought that struck me was, what does a president of a provincial club, province, do?
That's a tough enough question to answer. I suppose you're the face, if you like, of the province. So you get to represent the province at games, to attend all the official functions. In normal times, you would have gotten to travel with the team and represent Connacht home and abroad. But with COVID at the moment, it's a bit of a fluid situation. So we have to wait and see how things pan out.
Yeah, it's well written about that, and the main reason that we've had you on, because we wanted to mark the occasion of 135 years of Connacht Rugby and the first time that there's been a president at provincial level, I understand. Why is it taking this long, Anne, do you think?
I don't know, really. I think there's possibly a perception out there that maybe it's more of a man's arena, especially at kind of administrative or at this level. So maybe a little bit of reluctance for women to get involved, but hopefully this will now change things. You know, it is possible to continue and to get to this type of level in the sport.
Yeah, and like I know you talk about perception versus reality, but I was just having a look at the RFU management committee, for example, last night, a 25-person committee, 2 of which are women. What's your own take on that, or the RFU's promotion of women within the game, whether it's on the pitch or off it?
I think there's been encouragement for women to get involved, and like I've said in different articles during the week, positive discrimination is all very well, but I don't want women to be involved, at senior levels just because there should be a woman there. I think we need to earn the positions the same way as a man does. You know, if there's a man and a woman going for the same position, I think it's the best person for the job that should take up the role. Yeah, and I know that like you're very strong in yourself, that you've obviously worked up through the grades to get the gig on merit as well. So I mean, like that's a thing. But at the same time, when you look at that committee, for example, I mean, you look at all the key roles in it around the presidential lineup, and it's all very much male dominated, males of a certain vintage, I suppose, dominated. Like it is difficult when you see that. I think is it Mary Quinn and Sue Carty are the only 2 females on that entire committee. Like it is difficult to, when you talk about perception versus reality, to convey a message to women who are trying to come up through the ranks that this is an avenue that's available to you, when in reality it's really not. I suppose it depends on the person, really. You know, if you have enough interest in what you're doing, enough interest in the sport, it is possible. I mean, I can't say I've faced any major challenges in getting to this position. I've just put in the years. You need to learn the background. You need to learn the ropes as you're coming through. As I said, I'd hate just to have a woman parachuted into a position on the management committee of the RFU or another managerial position just because they want to improve the gender balance. Yeah, we were chatting to. Sorry, go on. Women to get involved. Yeah, do you see that part as your role, or are you just very much focused on the Connacht side? Do you see it as you are going to help promote, for example, like the women's game and the promotion of women and girls into the game? I think as a sport, I think women are already, women's rugby is starting to get a lot more recognition. Certainly in Connacht, we don't talk about men's rugby or women's rugby anymore. It's adult rugby and underage rugby. So we've made that change ourselves. I think for too long, women's rugby was kind of the poor relation almost, and all the focus was on men's. But I think that is changing. You know, the women's game, it's a great game to watch as well. And I think as it's opened up more and more to people, you know, as long as it's televised and people can get to the games. I mean, at the moment, that's not possible. But certainly television and radio has a big part to play in that. Yeah, and arguably that the national team have done more for the promotion of women's sport in this country than anything that's happened on or off the pitch over the last number of decades. And I suppose long may that continue. We were chatting to Andy Friend last week, and I don't know if it's an interview you've seen, but just about a range of things actually, but including how hard it is to sort of hold on to the coattails, I suppose, of some of the. We've just been having a conversation with Alan Quinlan there previewing the weekend's Heineken Cup quarterfinals, and it's a difficult place for Connacht to find themselves in. But how do you hold on to the coattails of the richer cousins when you look around at the richness of resources that exists around the other provinces? I think at this stage, you know, Connacht are certainly holding their own. I mean, you know, we earned our place in the Champions Cup last year. The result might not have been what we particularly wanted, but we had a couple of good wins. We always hold ourselves well on the pitch. I think it's a shame that COVID happened because we were just starting to come into our own at that stage. The squad this season, we've got a good blend of experience and younger players who've come through from the academy as well. And I think the thing about Connacht is that the whole grassroots to green shoots. It's all about nurturing talent at local level and bringing those through. And I think we've got a good balance, and I'm looking forward to the season ahead when it kicks off.
When you talk about those green shoots and nurturing that talent, and what do you mean? What structures have been put in place?
There's a big encouragement. I suppose it started back with Pat Lam when he came in as coach, and at the time Connacht might have been more focused, say, on Galway Mayo, but he included all of the provinces and made sure that all of the counties realised that Connacht Rugby isn't just about Galway. You know, it's part for every county in Connacht, and I think he developed the fan base greatly for the time he was here, and that's encouraged lots of kids to get involved. You've got the players going out to the clubs, they're doing camps, they're doing, you know, skills displays, they're giving their time to the clubs, and it just encourages people, because you see a kid from a junior club in Mayo and Sligo, and suddenly they think, well, this guy from down the road has made it, he's on the Connacht senior squad, so why not me?
Yeah, because like sometimes the idea of role models can be a little bit nebulous, or we can't actually see the exact end product of it. But you've clearly made use of the role models by sending them out into the community, and there's clearly going to be an upshoot from that. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's paying dividends as it is. Like, you know, we have a good balance of both Connacht and throughout Ireland on the team. So I think it's certainly paying off for us, and it fosters the idea for fans as well, because it's, again, you know, it's not just kids, but it's because Galway and Connacht is such a small place. You know, you can walk down Shop Street and meet the players, and they'll stop for a chat, and people identify with them by name, and it's much easier, I think, than in the other provinces. Have you considered how Connacht Rugby taps into communities where rugby has never really existed at all? You mentioned places in Connacht outside of Galway. I'm sure the more remote areas of Connacht probably have had a vice-like grip under the GEA for quite some time, and the GEA have done great things. How do you manage to tap into those communities? Well, there have been new clubs formed throughout Connacht. You know, you've got Heineken Champions. Even the other day I was chatting to a guy from Claremorris. There would never have been a rugby club there. They've got a pitch. They've got, you know, they're starting their minis this weekend. So I think the whole success of Connacht, particularly if you go back to the Pro 12 win, that encouraged all of the province to get involved. I mean, there were huge crowds to welcome the team back. Everybody got invested in it at the time, and local communities started up clubs, and that's certainly helped, and it's been a success. Because it definitely feels as well that there is a real identity to Connacht at the moment. Certainly under Andy Friend, it was definitely the case under Pat Lam as well, where you kind of knew the brand of rugby that Connacht were going to go out and play. I think they became everybody's second team for that Pro 12 campaign. Maybe a bit of anti-Leinster bias by people going into that final, but that was the case. Like, that helps, that on the pitch you have a brand of rugby that is really attractive, and people around the province are like, all of a sudden, I want to watch that game and I want to watch this sport. I think so. I mean, Connacht are playing a very exciting game at the moment. You know, it's fast moving, it's skillful, it's a joy to watch. It's like, you know, it's like rugby should be, really. Yeah, for sure. Like, how do you then build on that? What is the next step? Because I know Andy was talking about hopefully the development of new facilities, and with the right people in tow as well, you can really take this thing to the next level. That's right. I mean, before the whole lockdown, I mean, we had got the funding for the development of the sports ground. We have got planning permission. Everything is pretty much in place when it's safe to move forward with that. And I think the decision to stay in the sports ground has been a great one. The fact that we've got a stadium in the centre of the city where you can walk down into Eyre Square, you can wander into town. I think that's a huge bonus. I think any of the clubs that have their facilities close to the city, you certainly see the difference, and that feeds back then into the lifeblood of the city as well. I mean, when there's a big match in Connacht, you know, Galway's alive for the couple of days beforehand, and for that weekend, you know, you've got all the visiting supporters. And again, you know, we're a small city. You know, you have your supporters wandering around town in their supporters gear, and everyone is welcoming them. And it's just, I think it's just, we're lucky. We've got a good setup. We've got a great fan base, and everything just seems to, at the moment, seems to work for us. So just looking forward, as I say, to getting back into the new season, and hopefully being able to get fans back into the sports ground again at some point. Yeah, how important is that? Because I guess it's such a social event. It is the lifeblood of every sports organisation. But is it almost like a ticking clock in your head at the moment that fans need to get back in ASAP?
Not really. I think everybody understands the current situation, and the last thing anybody wants to do is put players in jeopardy. I mean, they're professionals at the moment. They're all in their own little bubble, as a team. They're tested regularly, and that's the most important thing, their health at the moment. It's great to see games, being able to just watch live games again on TV is a huge bonus. I think the fans are always going to be there. We're just happy to be able to watch sport again, and hopefully, as things start to open up, we can get back there, but only when it's safe for everybody to do that.
Just one last one for me. There's a story in one of the papers this morning about the RFU, I think, were to take a hit of, they'd projected around 20 million, and obviously in the nature of these things and the unpredictable nature of where we're at the minute, that period has been extended, and now they're looking at potentially, and I know Philip Brown is before the Dáil COVID committee today, the special committee, to give an update on the state of finances, and they're talking now about estimates in the region of 30 million quid, and I don't know if it's overstating it to say that there's an existential threat to professional rugby in Ireland now. What's your view of that?
I mean, there's a huge loss of revenue, and that's the mainstay of the budgets. Obviously, the RFU have been working on this, like the GAA, like soccer have over the last couple of months, and trying to all of the professionals, the administrative staff, everybody is taking pay cuts. Everyone is trying to do the best that they can. The gates are a huge loss. I mean, that's where your revenue is generated. But I think the RFU, like the others, are being sensible. They're looking at their budgets. They're planning ahead. They're planning for the possibility that there may be no gates, and we just have to wait and see what happens. Hopefully, I mean, I can't see professional rugby coming to an end, but we certainly need the injection of revenue, but again, health and everybody's safety is the priority. Can
Irish professional rugby, can Connacht Rugby see that through without the gates for what could be, I mean, it could be another 12 months, it could be anything, we're really not sure, but in terms of the finances, is that something that Connacht Rugby can ride out?
Again, we've got a great board, we've got great financial people in place there, and they've planned for these possibilities. As I said, Connacht are in a good place. Hopefully, we're not looking at not having gates for a long period of time, but we've planned for that possibility, and we can deal with that. But let's hope that every people get a handle on COVID and how to deal with it in sport, and how to let spectators back in. But as I say, no, we're in a good place in Connacht, and we've certainly plans in place for any eventuality. And at the moment, it's just a day-by-day basis as we see how things work around the country.
Yeah, well, look, that strikes something of a positive note, which is a good place to leave it. Well done, and congratulations on the job, and best of luck with the tenure, Heneghan, and thanks for taking the call.
Thanks for talking to me.
The new Connacht president, and we shall watch that with interest. As I said, Philip Brown and his counterparts from the GAA and the FAI are before the Dáil committee today, the special COVID committee, to discuss all things finances. We'll see how that pans out over the next little while. Okay, we're turning now to football, and Vera Pauw was this week asked about the decision by Germany. Obviously, the big game upcoming tomorrow afternoon in Essen, but by Germany to announce that they're going to be resting I think it's 4 of their best players for the game away to Montenegro next week. And Vera Pauw, the Republic of Ireland coach, feeling that she doesn't have an issue with them resting players, but certainly didn't appreciate them announcing it in public before they play Ireland tomorrow.
This moment better than USA, in my opinion. So we have to be very realistic. And even though we don't plan to defend a lot, because we plan to play an open game, we know that we will be pushed back.
Do you think you can take any inspiration? You weren't involved at the time, but the game against the Netherlands 3 years ago and the 0-0 draw away, that was a really good performance by Ireland that evening.
Yeah, defensively, especially, yeah, we all know that. But the Netherlands is a complete different team than Germany. The Netherlands, they don't like when they're getting under huge pressure, and that is what Ireland did. Plus, they just won the European Championships. They had a complete different status. They couldn't walk on the street anymore. They came together for the first time again. They played against Ireland and they thought, oh, we'll show off because the stadium is full again. So it's a completely different game. And Ireland did fantastically. I've seen that game back then, of course. But it's incomparable with this game, because this is crucial for Germany. When they win, they are qualified. They've already said that many players will not travel to Montenegro after the game. I don't know if you've seen that. The top players will not travel to Montenegro, which in my opinion is not fair play, because it's false competition. But they have the right to do that, of course. Martina can...
Yeah, it's Vera Pauw there in conversation with the media yesterday. Ruth Fahy, good morning to you.
Good morning, guys. How are you doing?
Good. She's pretty disgusted by all accounts that not so much of the resting, but the announcement of the resting. Is she right?
I was a bit surprised at that one, to be honest. I think it's probably fair. I think everyone knows it's what's going to happen. I mean, Germany have played Montenegro already, absolutely annihilated them along with Ukraine. That's inevitable that they're going to rest their best players. Announcing it is just, I suppose, formalising it, verbalising it. Vera seems to think that's not fair play, but really it's what's going to happen anyway. I don't think Germany will be too concerned about that, to be fair.
She might be getting her excuses in early. And by all accounts, like, it's in some ways kind of odd reading some of the preview of this game. It's everybody understands the gulf in class here. You're talking about a team that are second in the world and arguably should be first, and a team that are 30 odd in the world. And there seems to be also a predetermination about the outcome here, even from Vera Pauw listening to this week, saying that, listen, it's not realistic to talk about us getting anything out of the game. Like, I understand the dynamic of it, and there is a gulf in class, but it seems I don't know, extraordinarily defeatist almost in some regard, even before a ball is kicked.
Yeah, and I think if you actually listen back to Vera from when she first came into the squad in 2019, there's one word I would use to describe her is realistic. She was very careful to always maintain that when the group came out, Germany were in a different level. So she's kind of had this rhetoric in place since the very start. It's true. Germany are in a different level. They're ranked second in the world. Ireland ranked 32. They're a different beast completely, but I suppose, as you say, to go in, she's trying to downplay the chances because Germany have scored 31 goals, are unbeaten in 4 games. Realistic is the word. If we're being realistic, if Ireland can keep the score, if they can concede 3 or less, that will be doing well. It's rather than being defeatist, I think it's just being realistic, because in the past I think we've gone into games like this and kind of talked about dreams and luck and chances. I think she's trying to just set a standard for how we talk about the game here. That's all. It's not defeatist. I mean, you always have a chance. I actually, just looking through the group this morning, if Ireland could nick a draw, which is always possible, a draw then against Ukraine would actually be enough to get them second place in the group. Also, if Ireland nick a draw, even if Greece somehow managed to get full points, Germany aside in the next couple of games, it's still enough. So a draw is absolutely huge for Ireland. 1 point could do the world of difference. That could set them up in a completely different way against Ukraine in coming months' time. Can they get a draw? I don't think anyone's going to bet on that. Germany are Germany, but also what's happened to Germany last year, unfortunately for Ireland, is that they've actually stepped it up. They had quite a disappointing World Cup by their own standards, getting knocked out in the quarterfinals by Sweden. Since then, they've said they're kind of revitalised. Unfortunately for Ireland, it's not what we want. They competed in the Algarve Cup just before COVID hit. They actually got to the final, beating Norway 4-0, beating Sweden 1-0. They've blooded some new players. You know, when you look at their squad, they've got, I think, 5 or 6 players that were competing in the Champions League final 2 weeks ago. The likes of Marjan, Huth, Pop, like these incredible players. And like Vera said, a lot of comparisons are being made to Ireland's draw, the draw they made against the Dutch 2 years ago. These are not the Dutch. Like these are a side who are comfortable being under pressure, clinical. They know what Ireland can bring. So it's not, rather than being defeated, it is just being realistic. You know, one eye will always be in the Ukraine game. But if Ireland can nick a point here, that's absolutely huge, and we can't forget that.
It's interesting looking back on the German response to losing in the quarterfinals last year. There was a piece done with Martina Voss-Tecklenburg, the German manager, in DW.com. And the interviewer is like, it's been a few months since Germany were eliminated in the quarterfinals. Do you still lie in bed awake at night thinking about this? And then Voss-Tecklenburg is like, I no longer have any sleepless nights. And when I did, this was primarily because it was a very intense time for everyone involved. Like, this is just a culture over there where it's just, they have to win the World Cup or it's failure. That's basically it, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I remember the similar reports coming out. A couple of players came out and apologised for their World Cup performance. And we're talking a team that got to the quarterfinals. They narrowly got defeated to Sweden, but they weren't at their best. I think they were carrying a couple of injuries. They were really shockingly defeated, I think, by Sweden. But since then, they've done everything right. They've turned around completely. They've used that period, like I said, to blood new players. And then they stormed into the qualifiers. Like, the results are outrageous. Greece 5-0, beat Ukraine back-to-back 8-0. And Ukraine are probably seen as slightly higher ahead of Ireland. They're not a poor side, and to beat them back-to-back 8-0, with talk about a statement, beat Montenegro 10-0. You know, in Ireland's opening game, I think we kind of struggled through that slightly. Now, that was Pau's first game, and all being fair, that would beat them, I think it was 2-0 at the start. So they've responded as Germany would. I think they're coming into this game, they'll have a plan in place. I think it will be next to impossible to stop it. But if we can concede 3 or less, I think that'll be a positive if a performance can come through as well. And then all eyes on Ukraine.
And you talk about how they might set up, Ruth. Like, it was interesting even watching the game in Tala last night. Like that, we mentioned a bit earlier on, but for a period of the game, Rovers decide to have a go at the start of the second half and really put Milan on the back foot. And it doesn't take they've such quality in their team, obviously, which may be a fair enough comparison with the game that we're looking ahead to tomorrow. So how will Ireland set up? Is it a case that they kind of stick to their usual game plan, or actually have they really got to sort of shut up shop here and try and keep the scoreline down?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think Paula's been asked that in the last week or so. She's been careful to state that obviously we're going to be out to defend, but she plans to play an open game, which is, I'm not sure how genuine that is. I'm not sure how much you truly want to play an open game against Germany, but I think what she means is, previously when we went into big sides, it really would have been backs against the wall. We would have had a striker sitting deep, but like nearly in a flat 6 in midfield. I don't think it's going to be like that. Again, when you compare it to the Dutch game, what we have is 2 years of experience. What we have is a player like Rihanna Jarrett back, who wasn't available 2 years ago. A player who is slowly establishing herself in WSL at her peak fitness. Jarrett's a player that can actually hold up the ball and do something with it. Not that we weren't at that point before, but I remember the Dutch game, we actually had a couple of chances. We had 2 or 3 really decent chances with the likes of Leanne Kiernan, the likes of Amber Barrett, and even comparing Kiernan 2 years ago compared to now, she's had a full season of WSL. She's an older player, she's more experienced. Amber Barrett is now playing in the Bundesliga. She knows these German players. She's got a heap of experience on her shoulders as well. I think Pau will set up using her experienced players, but also having confidence instilled in the players that if that out ball comes, they can actually do something with it. And previously, that's probably something that we wouldn't have done before. I think she might utilise Katie McCabe at left full, O'Gorman at right full, just purely for experience, and then give McCabe that leverage to go forward if she wants to. So previously under Colin Bell, I don't think they probably had an option. I don't think they had permission to actually use the ball. I don't think I ever heard him say the words open play against a team like this. So there is something slightly different about this. If you have McCabe and then you have the likes of Kiernan, perhaps Heather Payne in front of her, with Jarrett playing a triangle, they can actually do something with it. I feel like if they have a counter, they can do something with it. It's about, I think that's only going to happen, being honest, a handful of times, 4, 5, 6 times. I think they'll have the confidence now that they didn't have before to actually create something. And then in midfield, I think Denise will probably sit back. I'd say Jarrett will be left alone up front. We've got the Liverpool captain, Ruth Fahy. We have Megan Connolly, who's now starting for Brighton. She was a college player 2 years ago with Florida State. She's now starting for a WSL team. So there's a bit more experience, a bit more ability, capability, and a chance to actually do something with the ball this time. So it won't be completely backs against the wall. I hope it's not going to be something that's kind of tough to watch for a full 90 minutes. I think there will be chances for Ireland, but it's just about being smart about it.
So you think she'll go to a 4 at the back with Katie McCabe at left? Because it was 3 at the back against Montenegro, was it?
Yeah, absolutely no chance going 3 at the back either. But I just feel like she might pull Katie back left full, literally just because she's been playing there with Arsenal and doing a fine job. Just to solidify it a little bit more, I think she'll probably ask Denise to sit back just to help Ruth Fahy and whoever is beside her. And then if you can have Jared up top, if she does start her, which I think she will. I think Rihanna got her first start against Man City with Brighton last weekend. By all accounts, was flying it. So she, like we've all seen her recently in the qualifying games, she can hold up the ball, she can turn and run. She won't be afraid of the Germans. And like I said, it could be different. There will be chances. Can they do something with it? That's up to the players then to show.
Just in an overall sense with Vera Pauw, you mentioned on some of the players that she has there now and like the quality that's there. Like, and I remember being at was it Norway? I can't even remember. I was at the game and I can't even remember. Was it Norway a couple of years ago, the playoff that we came up
Norway,
short in? Like it felt that day that we weren't, like you mentioned, Leanne Kiernan, for example, like it felt that day that we weren't necessarily playing to the strengths of that team. Is there more? It sounds like there is. Is there more of a sense of that now from the stewardship of Vera Pauw, do you feel?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's no doubt about it. She's done a fine job since she's come in 2019. Like, talk about a crazy year. Nobody anticipates a pandemic. But what she has done in the last couple of games is that she's shown that Ireland can do something with the ball. And I think that's something we hadn't previously seen before. I think Colin Bell obviously had a plan. I think he had a staged plan. He was going to solidify the defence and work from there. I think Pauw came in, and from the very start, she was quick to acknowledge that we do have players who can do stuff with the ball. She's been public in her praise for the likes of Dean Sullivan, which is completely justified. But it's not just, not just Denise who can do things. Megan Connolly has been a rising star in the past, hasn't quite reached her potential. Now she's starting to do that in the WSL. So what's different now is that we have players who are actively playing abroad. So we often had a lot of players abroad who might have kind of moved contract to contract. We have players now who are starting to establish themselves. So again, these things just take time. A lot of the women's leagues are still in their budding stages. We still have 5 women's National League players in the squad, which is interesting, which is really good. We've won 16-year-old Ella Molloy, who is just coming through at senior level for Wexford Youth. She just got Player of the Month for August. So in fairness to Pauw, she's building on her strengths. She's coming at a really good time. And I often thought when Colin Bell left, I just thought that was just a real pity, because I think the Irish women's team are at a really pinnacle point in our historical development. And Pauw's coming at a really good time. She's the right person to come in. I really like the way she speaks to the media. I like her positivity, but I have to appreciate her realism as well, that, we may not go in and get in against the Germans, but she knows exactly what she's doing. And I think if she can get a performance tomorrow, her plan is very much in place.
Yeah, good stuff. And so your prediction here is, I know you're saying that if we could get a point out of, I suppose, either this Germany game or the return leg, that'd be, in a lot of respects, job done. But your prediction here is just try and keep it to 3-0 and then focus on Ukraine.
Being honest, that's my prediction. Yeah. But let's wait and see.
Wait and see what happens. Ruth, thanks a million.
Thanks a million, guys. Have a good day.
Thanks a lot. Cheers, you too. Ruth Fahy on the line there to preview that game tomorrow. It's live in the telly box as well. The Republic of Ireland against Germany. Good chance to get to see them up close and personal. You were mentioning, Eoin, and I meant to come back to you at the time, about the disappointment from Tala last night, about the Rovers result, obviously. Do you know, it actually felt to me, watching Gary O'Neill afterwards and Stephen Bradley afterwards, that they weren't a bit disappointed. Like, there was almost no more than Ruth was saying there about trying to contain the scoreline a little bit tomorrow. I felt it was like a little bit almost sort of job done.
I guess you could say that job done in terms of holding their own. Like, I mean, they still lost the game of football. Like, it's obviously against one of the most storied clubs in world football, so you obviously have to temper your expectations for that. They would have had an aim to go out there and survive against AC Milan and beat AC Milan last night, and I don't think you can. Like I'm sure that there was probably a deep satisfaction that will come over time with the way Rovers acquitted themselves last night. I just don't think you can say job done after losing a game.
I'm not being in the slightest bit disparaging towards them, but I think they felt very pleased with their night's work last night.
Like maybe they are. Like I still think to be very pleased, you probably need to get something out of a game. Of course, if you ask Stephen Bradley, did you give a good account of yourselves? Of course they did. Like, I mean, there's no question about that. I mean, the gulf in resources and finances, in star quality on the pitch that comes from that between the teams is enormous. Like that was the fact of the matter of these two teams going up last night. But on the evidence of what we saw on the pitch, the gap was there for sure, but it wasn't as big as you might have thought it should have been. So that could either be because AC Milan are in pre-season, but a large part of that is down to Shamrock Rovers themselves and the plan they had and the way they went into it. Like the worst thing we can possibly do, though, is say that Shamrock Rovers, should be pleased or that they should be delighted with how last night went. That's my opinion. Like, I mean, and I can see why they might get satisfaction from it. I think really it should be right, okay, that's an okay base to look at when hopefully down the line there might be more big European nights coming to Tallaght, and we now have this learned experience of how to approach a giant of the game when they come to town, how to deal with, say, a huge threat in someone like Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who was very, very good last night, let's not forget. They now have that information, and the next time they go out there, perhaps things are a little bit easier, and maybe then a big cup upset on the European night is something that they are now a step closer to because of losing last night. That is something that I think is probably tangible. But to say very good night, like job done sort of thing, for losing a game, not sure I'm having that.
I think that this as it is a discussion often does on, it comes back to our respective lineages and our respective expectations when it comes to the sports teams that we're involved with. Mine being generally having very little expectation because the teams I'm following, they're not great. And yours being one of, rich heritage and storied past. And if you don't have 47 All-Ireland medals in your back pocket, sure, who are you? I definitely got... I watched the game last night and I thought... look at absolutely. If you can try and do a Shelburne on it, you can try and get something out of the game, or you can try and go and beat them, or Dundalk, and that's absolutely fantastic. Or Rovers themselves, to be fair, that's absolutely fantastic. But I do think that I definitely got a very strong sense of it was a job well done last night. Like, I think you can't argue with that, given that you're talking about. I mean, I used this expression to John Hartson a few weeks ago, and he nearly helped me on the spot. But one of the best teams on the planet, like that's an inarguable point, versus a team that are, the League of Ireland is not considered in that regard.
Yeah, and like I guess the question then is, which is there a bigger gap between? Is there a bigger gap between Shamrock Rovers and AC Milan, or is there a bigger gap tomorrow between Ireland and Germany? Time will tell, but you suspect that there's probably a bigger gap between Ireland and Germany, maybe, and that's probably to do with the fact that the heights that Germany are hitting at the moment are absolutely incredible. As you rightly pointed out, you could make a case that they are the best team in the world at the moment. Devastated that they got to the last stage of the World Cup last year. I'm not saying that. I mean, Ireland have quality in positions. They've got players playing at the top level in certain positions, and maybe Shamrock Rovers don't have that. That it really is like League of Ireland versus Serie A, you could say, is maybe a bigger gap overall. But I don't know. I think the kind of relative height that Germany can hit is a bit higher than the relative height that AC Milan are hitting in recent seasons. So I see the comparison you're trying to make, but I also think there's an aspect of the Ireland team at the moment where they've had a few tough years, and there will have to be a measuring stick of progress where they will play Germany again in a few weeks' time, or in next month, isn't it? They'll have to do it again. So not actually coming away with a small defeat tomorrow, I could probably read more into that on a psychological level, like Shamrock Rovers don't get to do it all over again sort of thing, and whereas Ireland do. And I think that's an important thing, and I think we will have to get to a point with the Ireland team soon where getting hammered by a team like Germany won't be an acceptable result. I'm not saying it will be acceptable tomorrow for Vera Pauw, but I do think we are edging towards a place, which is a good thing, that they'll have to cause an upset soon, and that will then bring the standards up. And again, that's a positive.
Oh, and I am Connacht Rugby, and you are the arrogance of Leinster Rugby in this conversation. That is primarily what I'm taking away from this.
The Pro 12 final, as we've already been talking about earlier on, that's when Connacht Rugby expected big things from themselves, and look what happened.
Well, there's a classic Munsterism if I've ever heard it, calling it the Pro 12. We're turning tack to golf now, and Rory McIlroy has been got off to a pretty impressive round at the US Open last night. He was speaking before he got his first round underway at the US Open. He was impressive 67 yesterday, but he did talk about. We're going to talk to Joe Molloy, by the way, in just a minute to get his thoughts on the opening round at Winged Foot. But here's Rory on putting things in perspective at the tournament with his newborn baby at home and how it's made things nice and busy in the build-up.
When I say it's not the be-all and end-all, I mean, it's a major championship, and I've grown up my whole life dreaming of winning these tournaments, and that's not going to change. But if it doesn't quite happen, then I can live with that and go home and be very happy and leave what's happened at the golf course at the golf course. I think that's maybe something that I haven't done so well in the past is I haven't left my job at the office. Basically, I've brought it home with me, and I've let it affect my mood and how I am, and I think having that little bit more perspective definitely helps. Yeah, they're doing great. Thankfully, everyone's healthy, which is obviously the most important thing. Yeah, they're good. Erica's bounced back well. She's back doing her 4-mile runs and stuff in the mornings, and so a lot tougher than I am. But yeah, everyone's good at home. It was tough to leave on Sunday. Could have spent an extra couple of days there for sure. But yeah, everyone's good, thankfully, and just grateful that everything's good at home, and it allows me to come up here and focus on what I'm supposed to do.
And the follow-up is, have you changed a diaper?
I actually changed the first 2 diapers, so I'm very proud of that. But yeah, I've got my hands dirty, put it that way.
Oh, we appear to have lost Adrian Barry there. We'll get straight into this, Joe. Rory McIlroy, good morning, by the way, Joe. Talking about changing diapers and getting his hands dirty. Like, this is an interesting prospect. I was thinking about it before yesterday, that a man who has openly admitted that he reads so many self-help books, he thinks so much about psychology, he thinks about the mind so much, a newborn child can't not have a seismic impact on how this guy views the sport that he plays.
Yeah, I guess that's true. It seems to be a phenomenon generally in sport, doesn't it? That new fathers seem to do very well. The nappy factor.
The
Bryson
diaper factor,
DeChambeau. The diaper factor, of course. Excuse me. Bryson DeChambeau apparently a couple of weeks ago had run the numbers on this. I kid you not. This is like the mad scientist, Bryson DeChambeau. So he had run the numbers.
He was thinking about a career move, was he?
I mean, I would not put it past him. He'll have a new one every week if it can get him over the line. So he'd run the numbers, and you are, your chances go up massively. Yeah, Danny Willett famously won the Masters right after he became a father for the first time. I mean, how can you not feel good about life? How can you not kind of approach the event as serious as it is with a kind of sense of, well, it's not the most important thing, and therefore maybe you're that touch more relaxed, and it's a very special time. It's a lovely thing. So it certainly can't hurt now that everything has gone well and that, mother and child are healthy. Interestingly, I mean, if you're looking at the top 4 or 5, we have McIlroy there, brand new father, and we have Thomas Pieters, who went off the radar. He's a brand new father as well. He shot 4 under yesterday. He's tied for second. So I don't know, Eoin. Might be something to think about.
Wow. That is clearly the first step to success. Just pop a baby out. That is incredible. What underpinned Rory's excellent performance yesterday?
That's a good question. I mean, he's just been so erratic post-lockdown. Like, he'd play brilliant holes and then throw in crazy holes. So I suppose the obvious initial answer would be he's not making as many mistakes, far fewer mistakes. He drove the ball incredibly well. I mean, just incredibly well. And that had been missing a little bit of late. So right from the off, that's a huge advantage, his biggest advantage back. And that set him up for a lot of good chances. The course, which we should talk about because it was kind of disappointing, I think, in how it all transpired yesterday. But the course meant that when he was driving the ball so well, he had lots of 9-irons and wedges and, 8-irons at a push into greens. And so, you give yourself a lot of chances. He put it pretty well. He held a couple of big ones. A lot of players did, actually. The greens seemed to be rolling quite well. And the one example maybe of what's still lurking there a little bit, but only lurking there a little bit, is his 10th hole. And at this stage, he was 3 under, a beautiful front nine. So he effectively drove the green, which very few players even attempted to do. Most players laid back and hit a short wedge on. But McIlroy drove the green, so he's got an eagle putt suddenly from 30, 35 feet. And he 3-putted, and it was a real moment where he looked to the sky and you think, God, a 2-putt for a birdie around here when I've hit that drive is criminal, really. And I think he might have followed up that hole then with poor enough effort in the next. It affected him because he knew it was such a good chance. And that's always kind of lurking there with him a little bit, And there was one other hole worth mentioning as well. This was all around the same time. This was in the same 2 or 3 hole stretch. If we're kind of talking about the dangers there, where, again, beautiful drive, and he's got a wedge in his hand, and he pulls the wedge terribly, and doesn't give himself a chance, and he 3-puts from there, and it's a really bad bogey. And Paul McGinley made an interesting observation on McIlroy, because his wedges have been talked about as much as his putting. And McGinley said that when McIlroy has a yardage, which is a full wedge where he can just go at it, he's very, very good, and he'll hit lots of good wedges in those circumstances. However, if he's between numbers, as they say, and he has to maybe, hit a 3/4 shot with this wedge as the yardage requires, McGinley said he struggles to take speed off. That's one of the great skills that someone like Dustin Johnson has improved massively over the last few years. He's able to, with the use of TrackMan on the practice ground, he can adjust his swing, and if he needs a 68-yard shot or a 78-yard shot, he can adjust. And maybe that's something McIlroy of late, because he had improved this in the last couple of years, but of late has struggled with. So I'm talking about the dangers or the concerns which are sort of lurking. But really, Eoin, you would have to say in general, he drove the ball brilliantly. A lot of his irons were very, very good. I thought he putted well, absolutely. And the key point with McIlroy is he has only ever won majors when after the first day he's either been leader or 1 shot off the lead. McIlroy needs, I think, to see himself in the leaderboard. You can see it in his body language. If you just turn on the TV and you see McIlroy before you see his score, you'll have a decent bet as to how he's doing. It's just, Jack Nicklaus told him years ago he needed to actually camouflage his feelings a bit more because it was just so obvious, but that's not in his makeup. So I think McIlroy feeds off pressure, being on the leaderboard in the tournament, and so being 2 shots back, that is brilliant, because particularly of late, you think of Portrush and several other majors of late, he's been out of the tournament after the first round. So, from our perspective and hoping for a really exciting weekend, the fact that he's on that leaderboard, he's feeling good, it's really, really promising. Now, not without a few dangers given his recent form, as I've just kind of discussed, but he would have bitten your hand off for 3 under par, 2 shots off the lead on day one. So that's really good.
Yeah, and it's Justin Thomas up in front, 5 under par, 1 clear of a group of 3. Patrick Reed, Thomas Peters, and Matthew Wolff. I was watching some of the coverage last night, Joe, and listened to Paul McGinley. The lowest score, Justin Thomas's score yesterday, was the lowest score at a US Open at winged foot, and there's been a lot of conversation about the lowness of the scores after day one. But like you look at last year, 13 under par, it was 16 under par in 2017, but it's very rare to hit those lows. Like Rory at Congressional, worth a mention as well, obviously, in that way. But McGinley, very strong in it last night. Doesn't want to see, in his own words last night, another generic PGA setup. Isn't the US Open supposed to be tougher than this?
Yeah. Yesterday was such a disappointment. So the US, to give it a very brief version of this, US Open is meant to be the toughest test in golf. That's the marketing slogan, And, for a long time, it was the saying went, it was single file fairways and incredibly fast greens and thick rough. That's kind of the MO. That's what you're signing up for. And somewhere along the way, the USGA, who set up this event, they've lost their way and they've done some mad stuff. We've had crazy low scoring at times. They've taken the tournament to all sorts of quirky places. Chambers Bay a couple of years ago, nobody seemed to like. I kind of enjoyed the madness of it, but it didn't seem to go down terribly well. So I think it's lost its identity a touch. And 4 of the last 5 US Open winners have been under par. you know, and it's sort of a thing with the US Open, like, can you beat par to win, you know? And 4 of the last 5 have been under par. And as you said, like, a generic PGA Tour event is what this thing can become if it's not careful. So there was a real sense that we're back at Winged Foot, you know, where Jeff Ogilvy won in 2006 and he was 5 over. Hale Irwin won there in 1974. The Massacre at Winged Foot, it was called, in 1974. He won with 7 over. You know, Bobby Jones won here in 1929 with 6 over. So there was a sense we're back here where just 14 years ago, Jeff Ogilvy won with 6 over. And we thought, okay, you know, we've had, you know, 4 of the last 5 years, US Open have been under par. We're going to really see some fun and games here, which is, you know, kind of, it's fun to watch them struggle a little bit. And all during the week, all the players were saying, they were being asked, will an under par score be the winner here? And they all said no. They didn't think so. So what seems to have happened sometime across Wednesday is they cut the rough down a little bit. I mean, not dramatically, from 5 inches down to 4 inches, but it's not nothing. And the rough is still very thick. Don't get me wrong, very thick. But they did that. The pin positions, I don't know if you would have seen, even if you're watching for 20 minutes yesterday, so many of those pins were in the middle of the green. You know,
very favourable.
Not very favourable. Technology has played a factor here. You might have heard Paul McGinley was making the point. He could remember 06 and guys where they were once hitting 5 irons into certain greens are now hitting 9 irons. That's a different world. You know, in terms of being able to stop the ball, that is just a different stratosphere. So technology, you know, that is a part of this story, and that's what happens when you go back to courses after a long period of time. And then the greens were soft, inexplicably. I was just, like, yesterday was disappointing in that respect. The greens were soft, so they're hitting
how
short.
Much of that, Joe, how much of that can they change is the point, right? Like, so you talk about the setup or the single file fairways, so they can shake it up today if they want.
They have a sub-air system under the greens. You know, the better courses do. They have total control over those greens. And really, like, the way to counteract technology is not distance. You know, it's not like, let's add an extra 1,000 yards onto this course. It's the greens. And we've seen that in the last couple of weeks. The tougher courses have had, you know, rock hard, rock fast greens. And these, I mean, you even with the softness of them yesterday, you'd have seen they're very sloped. Like, you can imagine if these greens get really fast, a ball's kind of, it's starting to roll and it's still rolling and it's rolled off the green. You can have all that kind of carnage. Who knows why they didn't yesterday? I mean, the 2 best kind of conspiracy theories, if you want, are one, that they were concerned about pace of play. And obviously, you know, maybe in the weekend they've less daylight than they might have. I don't know. But, you know, pace of play is a factor, 3 balls. So let's just, you know, keep things moving at a reasonable pace. The course is tough enough. And come the weekend, they'll unleash hell. I don't know. I think, you know, the USGA have been criticised so much over the last couple of years because they've kind of made a mess of different tournaments. And I just think they played it a touch safe yesterday. But, like, the net result was, what, you have 32 players even par or better. You have 21 under par after the first day. Like, McIlroy made the argument, you know, if you shot even par, you were kind of around the top 10. So it's not like it's a total kind of PGA Tour event where it's not difficult at all. It was still very tough and made people look foolish. But I think the masochists in us, when we tune into the US Open, like, we want it to be brutal. We want the players like having strops and mentally breaking down, and, you know. So Justin Thomas with his wedge in his hand or his 9-iron in his hand, you know, knocking balls into the middle of the greens. I found it a touch boring at times yesterday. Not to, like, Shane Lowry shot 6 over, Phil Mickelson shot 8 over. You know, if you weren't playing well, it still got you. Of course, it is still a US Open, but I just wanted them to kind of just turn the dial a bit more. I'd be curious as to know why they did what they did yesterday, but yesterday was not a memorable day, put it that way. You know, that's the best way of putting it up. I've already forgotten it. It was quite boring a lot of the time.
Yeah, there can't be 3 more 65s is the point, and they gotta dial it up. They gotta give us casual golf fans what we've come to see, Joe. So Justin Thomas up front. I know Peter Lowry made a big play for Patrick Reed. For no great reason other than, I think, a bit of instinct in Golf Weekly during the week. So it's stacked. Like Thomas Peters, you mentioned McIlroy, Lee Westwood suddenly in the mix. I think a lot of people will be keeping an eye out for him. But even though we don't know what shape the course is going to look today, you mentioned the state of the greens or the pin positions. What's your instinct, having seen day one now, as to who's going to end up on top here come Sunday?
Well, you know, the thing is, it's completely stacked, isn't it? Like, how many players are in the top 20? So the gap is nothing. The gap is a Justin Thomas double or triple bogey away from the guy who's in 15th. So, I mean, that's one of the downsides yesterday as well of not having a tougher test. I think it's a bunch leaderboard. So, I mean, it's all to play for. Thomas looks exceptionally good, and he is exceptionally good, and he's a world number one over the last while. He doesn't have a weakness, Justin Thomas. You know, he is just phenomenal. Peter Lowry picked Patrick Reed, I am convinced, because a caddy friend of his told him Patrick Reed was looking good. That's how, you know. So Peter Lowry will make these picks and go, I think this week Patrick Reed, with no real reason, as we told him at the time. So obviously, I suspect Peter, you know, has good intel, and the word was that Reed was hitting the ball well. So you would expect Thomas to hang around. You would expect Reed to hang around if we're going via the leaderboard. Peters, I'm not so sure, just because of his form of late. I think, you know, diaper effect and everything, I'm not so sure. Matthew Wolff is interesting, Adrian. He's like, you know, wonder kid, hits the ball a gazillion miles, quirky swing. He was thereabouts at Harding Park, San Francisco, in the last major last month. So I'd expect Wolff to hang around. McIlroy, we're hoping hangs around. Like, he should, really. He was in such good form pre-lockdown, and okay, whatever distraction he had with the pregnancy and, you know, these strange times, you would hope his mind's a bit more at peace now. And like I said, he's on the leaderboard. So McIlroy hopefully to hang around. Westwood, who knows? I mean, you'd be crazy to tip Lee Westwood to win. I think this is his 82nd major without a win, which is a record. Westhazen, really good player. He could hang around. Kokrak, Todd, on it goes. I'm not so sure. Sander Schauffele at 2 under.
In a word, you're going for?
In a word, I am going to
Patrick Reed. Joe, go on. You know you want to.
Patrick Reed. Patrick Reed had a hole in one yesterday, and people barely celebrated with him. That's his level of popularity. God love him. Yeah. Do you know what? For the hell of it, Adrian, I'm looking at Rory, and I'm just thinking the nappy factor. We could have wrapped this up with the first question.
He's got his hands dirty, Joe.
Oh my word, Bryson DeChambeau going off to have a baby just for the possibility of winning the major has got to be the highlight of this piece. Joe, good man.
That's nice. You did it.
Enjoy the weekend.
All right, see you.
Good stuff. Take it easy. You can check out Golf Weekly, by the way. All of that good stuff there with Joe, Peter, Nathan, Fionn, and Ronan Flood is their very special guest this week. He was really good stuff there from the caddy of Padraig Carrington. So that is pretty much it. Eoin, good man.
Thanks, Adrian. Good to chat to you this morning.
You'll be cheering on Saracens tomorrow, so enjoy that.
Yeah, can't wait to see the smile wiped off Leinster's face at long last tomorrow.
Right, enjoy the weekend. Good stuff. That's pretty much it from us for this morning. Remember that OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good mornings start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle that day ahead. We're back on air and online from 7 o'clock this evening, coming up on OTB Sports Radio today. From 10:30, you're going to check that full stream of the Cadbury FC Roadshow. It's Nathan in conversation with Ian Wright and Saul Campbell, a couple of Arsenal legends, and you can check out that conversation in full across the OTB Sports channels from 10:30 this morning. 1 o'clock, as we mentioned a bit earlier on, our live American football podcast will be streamed from 1 o'clock today. That's the Snap. At 3 o'clock, we've got Friday Night Racing. From 4 o'clock, Team 33 with the League of Ireland Legends interview. This time, Liam Coyle, the one in the hot seat there to chat to the lads. And from 6 o'clock on OTB Sports Radio, it's OTB Gold, where Joe Molloy sits down with Ruby Walsh. So a reminder too that Off the Ball, the only place to hear live and exclusive commentary from the Premier League and the Heineken Cup this weekend, live at the earlier time of 12:30 on News Talk on Sunday. Full commentary there of Ulster's Champions Cup clash against Toulouse, and Neil Tracy and Bernard Jackman will bring you commentary of that game, and then Nathan and Kenny Cunningham will bring you Chelsea against Liverpool in the Premier League from 4:30. But that's pretty much it from us from this morning. Enjoy your weekend. Good morning.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.